Amid the crowd of hungry monsters and clouds of dust emerges a boy. His cloak flutters in the wind, and he stands fearlessly and steadfastly, as if he does not notice the evil creatures at all. This boy is an alchemist who uses a technique that combines several things into one new creation and even allows him to use spatial storage. Confident that alchemy will solve any problem, he confidently takes several magical swords from the storage right now. Without a doubt, they were created using alchemy. The staff swung, rays of light lit up around, and suddenly many more appeared, a dozen swords that instantly destroyed the threat. This boy is not an ordinary person. He is a genius, a alchemist, vacant ord. System completely shuts down, and at the same moment the capsule door opens. Powerful gusts of wind and clouds of dust rush around swiftly. When the capsule fully opened, Vakenord cautiously emerged from it, holding onto the edge of the structure, first pulling out one leg and looking around in surprise. The boy, surrounded by unfamiliar landscapes, slowly turned and carefully examined everything around. He tried to understand where he was, but to his surprise, everything around seemed foreign and completely unfamiliar. Around him only ruins, a pile of stones long overgrown with greenery. Once this was part of a beautiful building, and now only a testament to its former grandeur. Vakenord faced a severe illness, and despite all his efforts and attempts to cope, the ailment slowly and relentlessly destroyed his former body, which was once full of strength and health. A brilliant idea came to his mind, and as an experiment, he entered the cradle of rebirth to cure his illness. Because of this, he fell into a coma and slept for a very long time. The boy was filled with joy and delight. He trembled from an incredible surge of emotions. Realizing that all his efforts were successful and he was still alive, he felt indescribable happiness. Bacon threw his head back, confidently filled his lungs with air, and took a deep breath. He felt that his memory remained with him, the disease that tormented him receded, and there were no more coughing fits. He smiled sarcastically, recalling the exclamations and anxiety of those to whom he had told about his idea. "You saw it, right? My experiment succeeded," the alchemist chuckled. The hero suddenly turned around, saw his reflection in the mirror, and froze in surprise. The unexpected appearance made him stop and look at himself carefully. The body became impressively young, as if it were 20 again. The freshness and energy that he had in his youth returned. But this was by no means sad news. Memories of the past remained with him, and inside he was still over 40. Vaken, overwhelmed with joy and with a wide smile, decisively said that he would continue the in-depth study of alchemy, which he loved so much. But there was still one equally important question left. What happened, and why was the laboratory in such a state? Snapping his fingers, the alchemist ordered to start the test. The boy wanted an explanation from Zosmos. Suddenly, in the silence, Bacon's demand to his faithful assistant was heard. A small light, like a bright star, suddenly descended from the very sky and emitted a dazzling glow. Zosmos' answer flew through the air. "He is a fairy, artificially created by Vaken." The boy joyfully greeted his friend. It seemed they had not seen each other for a long time. Zosmos responded only to the master's request. "The check is complete. 501 years and 17 days have passed." Vaken, not believing what he heard, asked again. Fear gripped him. He exclaimed, "It cannot be true. 21 years. Horror sounded in his voice. He could not comprehend what could have happened. He spread his hands and asked in surprise if he really had slept so long, to which they replied that the alchemist had slept for 521 years in the cradle of rebirth. But what happened to the laboratory? Where did everyone go? What happened to the Morty's dynasty? There were many questions, but unfortunately there were no immediate answers. It was necessary to look into the archives because Zosmos was in sleep mode. After checking the archives, the assistant said that nothing remained. The hero shouted in surprise, "How could this have happened? The sage no longer works, so the data from the archive might be inaccurate." The hero wondered what happened, war or disaster. He had to calm down, and Zosmos advised him to write everything down. The hero sat down and began to write down everything that had just happened, and what he knew about his reincarnation, about how long he had slept. Calming down a bit and exhaling, Vakenord realized that this situation was actually very interesting. And indeed, all this was simply amazingly interesting for the alchemist. He even became excited. He not only managed to reincarnate, he found himself in a completely different time. The hero and the fairy rejoiced. It was a success. So much time had passed, alchemy had changed and probably grown to unprecedented heights. The alchemist enjoyed what had happened, as so many new and exciting things awaited ahead. As a researcher, he eagerly wanted to look into the amazing future, but now a completely different era had come. With sincere joy and admiration, he imagined how different cities looked today. how the images of people filling the streets change around him, how the streets themselves have transformed under the influence of time and new trends. It was impossible to be sure if the future had changed so much, so the hero decided to check it personally and ordered the ferry to teleport him to the nearest city. Opening his eyes, Vacant was already standing on a ledge from which the whole city was visible, a completely ordinary city. Looking around the streets, the hero stood in confusion. How could this have happened? Zosim, together with his master, looked around, swiftly flying over the roofs of houses. Vakin, looking around puzzled, could not believe that 500 years had passed and the surrounding landscape had hardly changed. He had always imagined a completely different future, but reality turned out to be different. After some time, his assistant finally pulled out some information from the archive. Now even crumbs of information were priceless to them. They found themselves in a part of the country called the Kingdom of Juri in the city of Sauvan. The country was already 200 years old, and it was ruled by a king together with the aristocracy, a true classical monarchy, Zosimos decided. And most importantly, in this country there was absolutely no information or mention of alchemists. As if they had never lived or worked here, their existence was simply erased from history. Detached, seemingly outwardly calm, but with a clear share of sadness and disappointment, he exhaled as if trying to release all the accumulated emotions and experiences inside him. The alchemist exclaimed indignantly that this simply could not be. It was impossible to believe, even despite the fairy's dissatisfaction. Alchemy can solve the most diverse problems of humanity. It is very important for humans. It is used in various fields, and at the same time it simply cannot exist. The hero waved off the objections of the fairies and decisively said that relying only on archives was pointless. Everything must be checked personally. And Zosimos only excused himself, saying that the Tower of the Sage was controlled by someone strange. Vakin walked the streets of the city and looked around with interest. Familiar houses, passers-by, and ordinary everyday scenes surrounded him, but no matter how hard he tried, nothing could attract and hold his attention. Finally, he reached the market, which sparkled with bright colors and pleasant aromas. Fresh vegetables, fruits, and various baked goods lay on the stalls, and people walked back and forth, each immersed in their own thoughts and affairs. Some discussed goods, some chose the best, and some simply enjoyed the atmosphere. Suddenly, Bacon grabbed his stomach, which was rumbling from hunger. It was very uncomfortable and even a little painful. The alchemist, busy with his affairs, only now realized that he had not eaten or drunk for 500 years. He desperately must find money for food, but after 521 years, the value of money has changed so much that even guessing how much he needs is almost impossible. Bacon sharply turned to the voice of the merchant, who unexpectedly addressed him. A young man in a dark cloak was clutching a small bottle with a glowing potion, convinced that it was a healing elixir that would restore health and strength. He also had an antidote. Not hiding his joy, Bacon rushed to the basement, bombarding the young man in the cloak with questions whether he brewed this potion himself and whether he was an alchemist, and receiving an affirmative answer, snatched the bottle from his hands. The alchemist carefully stared at the vessel and its contents, focused and attentive, as if conducting a deep analysis, trying to decipher the composition, taste, and aroma of the liquid without even opening it. But the joy instantly turned into disappointment. It turned out it was not a potion, but trash filled with the cheapest ingredients that could be found. The hero frowned. If he himself had worked so terribly, he would have forced himself to redo it 100 times, although maybe this merchant just had too little profit. His stomach betrayed him and loudly rumbled. Bacon had a lot of questions, but now he was more worried about something else. The merchant advised him to go to the tavern across the street. Above the door of this tavern hung a beautiful wooden figure of a duck in flight, wings widely spread, and nearby the name, Dancing Duck. The hungry alchemist looked at this simple but at the same time quite beautiful building with curiosity and slight surprise, and could not hold back a smile. How could such a modest structure give such pleasant feelings? The hero and his assistant agreed. The tavern was impressive from the majestic wooden figurine to the very roof. Zosimus raised a rather important issue of lack of money, but Bacon calmly decided that it was not a problem at all. But he is an alchemist, his skills will easily cover all expenses, and if he has to wash the dishes, he will simply create a special machine for that. Pressing the bell to call a worker, the hero hoped that the tavern owner was a good person, and that it was enough to just explain everything and he would immediately understand. Suddenly, a silhouette of a girl appeared behind the boy. She pulled him out of his thoughts with her question. The stranger wanted to find out who this person was that had come here. When the girl came closer, her sad face was visible, her arms crossed on her chest, and her light wavy hair neatly tied with a scarf. she sadly said that the tavern was closed and asked them to leave. The alchemist and his assistant were gripped by panic. It seemed they were not welcome here at all. Hunger took over and he wanted to explain himself to the girl, but her apology interrupted him. Her eyes became glassy from tears streaming down her face. Her father lay bedridden from a terrible illness, and she could not manage the tavern on her own. Waiken, hearing this, decided to seize the chance. He introduced himself as an alchemist and offered his help. While the girl was still surprised, the alchemist and the fairy were already eagerly discussing such a wonderful opportunity to pay for the room with medical services, but it seemed her surprise turned into anger. Interrupting their hasty thoughts, she sharply swung her hand and struck the wrongdoer in the face with all her might. A loud bang echoed throughout the building. Unable to hold back tears, the blonde confessed that she would never trust an alchemist again. Her father fell ill after drinking vitamins made by him. Bacon could not contain his surprise. He really wanted to help the tavern owner and began begging his daughter to let him in, but she categorically refused. The hero did not give up. He was ready to help even for free, but the girl did not yield to persuasion. Can one believe such sweet words? After calming down a bit and gathering her thoughts, the girl finally dared. She looked into his eyes with curiosity and asked why he was so persistently trying to help her father. Zosim took the matter into his own hands, and while he was saying that they liked the tavern and that at first glance it was clear its owner was a very good person, her father only nodded in agreement, and the girl began to doubt. Waiken's assistant convinced the girl that this alchemist was very experienced, and at the same time asked her to introduce herself. She named herself Fiora and said that she worked as a waitress in this tavern. Zosimus also introduced himself and said that he was an artificial fairy created by his master, who had invested his knowledge into him. When he wanted to introduce his master, he simply walked past. It seemed he had already switched to alchemist mode and was fully focused on the problem. The assistant introduced his lord as Vacant Ord, just as he was entering the room, and the sick man was standing behind the girl. In the corner of a cozy, well-furnished room stood a bed on which lay a sick man. He was gently covered and he did not move at all, as if he was already in another world. The alchemist approached closer. A terrible sight opened before him. The man was decomposing alive. Disgusting ulcers were on his face. The skin seemed to be peeling off from the tissue of his face. Bacon immediately understood. This was not just poisoning by a potion, it was much worse. The poisonous decay inside the body was literally eating him away. It was rotting from the inside out. This condition was simply terrible and deeply repulsive. The man's daughter, unable to hold back tears, said that her father fell into a coma just yesterday, and immediately the room was filled with a disgusting stench. The situation was much worse than the alchemist had imagined. This is simply outrageous. Some incompetent, one might even say irresponsible alchemist caused this, and on top of that, he sells low-quality goods and his treatment methods only make everything worse. This will never be forgiven, and that is why Vacant was simply boiling with terrible anger. This situation shocked him and made him very angry. A storm of emotions rose in his heart. With determination and a desire to change the situation, he raised his hand. As soon as this happened, it was enveloped in a soft, pleasant light that radiated warmth. The boy, confident in his abilities and strength, decisively focused and got to work. It was time to show everyone around his true potential and talents. Without stopping his work, he ordered the steam to find out what had brought the patient to such a state. He waved his hand, drew a strange sign in the air with light, and at the same time urged his assistant persistently. Within a minute, an alchemical cauldron appeared in the room, creating a small space inside where it was possible to synthesize and substitute ideas about various substances. Meanwhile, Zosmos learned all this was due to improperly prepared fatigue potion, which was supposed to restore strength. Bacon was furious. It was precisely because of this that the poisoning occurred. Any beginner in alchemy knows how to prevent this. The worried girl turned to the alchemist, wondering if her father would be all right, but the alchemist seemed to pay no attention to her at all. He was completely immersed in his work. He continued drawing signs in the air with both hands. His movements were clear and confident, and it was evident that he knew exactly what he was doing. The boy was surrounded by soft streams of wind, and at the level of his head, 4 circles appeared. He, without losing his serious and focused facial expression, noted with obvious pleasure that the girl was very lucky in this situation. From all 4 circles emerged various ingredients for the potion: an unfamiliar herb, a couple of bottles, and a pouch. The alchemist added that the girl should not worry about her father because he was here and would help him. Slightly tilting his head back, he enjoyed what he was doing. It must be said, he had not felt so free and calm for a long time around him, as if in magical air flowed streams of energy and light, filling him with sincere joy and peace. When the ingredients fully appeared, Vacant directed them into the alchemical cauldron and they instantly flew inside, leaving behind not only a dazzlingly bright trail of light but also a gentle light breeze. The pot began to shine so brightly and unusually as if a living flame had ignited inside it. This light gently enveloped the entire room, filling it with pleasant warmth, creating an atmosphere of coziness and comfort. The alchemist spread his arms and continued to create energy and beams of light, and he himself realized that he liked it. He sincerely believed that studying and practical application of alchemy not only made him better, but also allowed him to make a significant contribution to creating a bright future for all humanity. It does not matter what happened to alchemy during his 500 years of sleep, the main thing is that people have always strived and will strive for a bright future. This aspiration is an integral part of human nature. That is why Vacant and other alchemists conducted numerous experiments one after another, tirelessly searching for how to make life better for everyone around. The alchemist remembered the faces of his comrades. They proudly studied new things with him and grew together, overcoming all obstacles on their path. Closing his eyes and sharply crossing his arms in front of his face, causing a clap that echoed throughout the room, the hero prepared for the final step. Shouting the command "Create," he opened his eyes and threw streams of light around the room which seemed to swirl chaotically, but in a moment they merged into one bright, sparkling star that shone. The light went out and the alchemist was already holding the spiritual medicine of Arunia in his hands. They relieved the symptoms of poisoning from the elixir and initiate the body's recovery process. Having received the order to administer the healing potion, Zosmos began to absorb it from the open jar like a sponge. After that, he flew up to the patient and began circling above him, pouring the contents directly onto the bed. The medicine sprinkled onto the tavern owner like magical powder that sparkled and reflected the sun. It was visible how the skin on his face instantly cleared and took on a healthier color. Zosim finished the work and reported that the body would recover in a couple of hours. It was clear that the medicine worked, and a barely noticeable, calm smile appeared on the man's face. Vacant turned to the girl and assured her that now everything would definitely be fine with her father, but the girl did not share his joy. She was confused and did not understand at all what had happened. The alchemist, pleased with what he had done, smiled. This medicine would greatly weaken the man, but he would feel better, so it was worth giving him another 2 or 3 days to rest. Taking the opportunity, the boy asked to stay in the tavern a little longer to observe the patient's condition. The assistant was worried that the girl might tell someone about that strange flying cube, because no one here really knows about artificial beings, but it seemed that Fiora did not even understand what it was. The young waitress cried with happiness and a warm, sincere smile blossomed on her face. She did not even know how to thank them. Vacant looked at her and smiled warmly, because he was simply doing what he considered his duty as an alchemist. It was his calling and his obligation to the people. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. It seemed she had imagined alchemists quite differently. A few days later, while Vacant was eating, he sighed deeply and holding a fork near his mouth, began to talk about his powers. Probably he had not fully recovered yet, and part of his powers had left him. Zosim nodded. The teacher was right. His characteristics had indeed noticeably changed. His magical and intellectual abilities had clearly weakened, as had his psychological age, so he should be careful. The sad alchemist resigned himself to having become weaker and having to live with it, but suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by an elbow strike in the back. The cheerful and lively innkeeper Edgar, with a huge piece of juicy meat in his hands, smiling and with sincere care in his eyes, generously urged the boy at the table to eat more, because he owed him. Vacant awkwardly refused. He was already full, but Edgar did not give up. A young body needs a lot of food. Probably because of the incredibly tasty dishes at the tavern, the boy had gained about 5 kilograms. The owner of the dancing duck gently patted the man on the shoulder and assured him that everything was free for him, but the alchemist cautiously pulled back and said he still wanted to pay. Edgar asked if Vacant was going to join the Adventurers Guild. It was the easiest way for a traveler to earn money, but the boy only looked at him in surprise. Who were these adventurers? The tavern owner pointed to the tall building outside the window and said, "There is the guild, at least register just in case. The archives say Aventuresti are the closest thing to alchemists right now and probably earn money by any means." Filled with determination, the legendary alchemist who had slept for 500 years headed to the majestic building, and the grateful Ophi Anta only waved to him. The alchemist approached the bridge leading to the guild entrance. Flags fluttered above the building. The guild itself had a watchtower and a beautifully decorated facade, but alchemy was no longer what it used to be, and now a new threat was brewing. The first-generation alchemist was puzzled by the fact that he had overslept 521 years and found himself among a noisy crowd of rough men in heavy armor, which only emphasized their physical strength. He always tried to live peacefully and not provoke anyone, but as soon as he entered the guild, he immediately found himself surrounded by men openly showing contempt and aggression. Lost with a confused look, he only raised his hands in a gesture of apology and, trying to clarify the situation, explained what was wrong with him and why he caused such a reaction. Just an hour ago, the boy, confident and determined, crossed the bridge leading straight to the guild and eagerly awaited what awaited him beyond these gates. He admired it from the inside with enthusiasm, and Zosmos, unable to resist curiosity, also flew out to look around. Beautiful chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The building itself had at least 2 floors. The first floor was filled with tables and benches, and the hall seemed crowded with various people. Adventurers immersed themselves in an atmosphere of joy. They drank, ate, and chatted cheerfully. Drinks spilled on the floor, pieces of food flew in all directions, and no one cared. Vaken was clearly waiting with impatience and fascinated curiosity for the amazing things he would be able to see in this place, when suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by someone's call. A stern warrior pointed at the hero and said that this place was not for people like him, not for little children, and this was quite expected, as he was addressed by one of the experienced adventurers, Beowulf. Without losing his joy, Beacon said that he came from distant lands and was told to look for work here. Beowulf was not satisfied with this answer, smiled, and asked if that was exactly why he wanted to become an adventurer. The boy, still smiling kindly, continued to look at the stern warrior. The latter's face seemed twisted with embarrassment and anger, which made him even more threatening. The warrior, without hesitation, suddenly turned around, pointed at the registration desk, and gestured for the boy to follow him. The other adventurers laughed. Beowulf was fussing over the newcomer again, and apparently he liked it. Completely ignoring the laughter, the veteran called Shirley to register him. A beautiful girl clapped her hands excitedly and greeted Beowulf and the newbie joyfully. Her name was Shirley. She was the leader of the Adventurers Guild. Shirley offered to take Var with her, but he refused. He had planned to be an adventurer all his life. Then, placing a heavy hand on Waken's shoulder, he said that he would be one too. The administrator, with a warm and sincere smile, greeted the newcomer who had just joined their famous Adventurers Guild. The alchemist awkwardly scratched his head and admitted that he had no idea who the adventurers were or what they did, so he asked for a more detailed explanation. Shirley and Beowulf exchanged silent glances. At that moment it became clear his questions were inappropriate and caused concern. Several of Vaken's new acquaintances were horrified. The veteran, trembling, pointed at the alchemist and asked how he could come here knowing nothing about adventurers, while the first-generation alchemist clumsily justified himself, saying he was from a very remote region. While Beowulf was guessing where that man was from a tribe or the jungle, the administrator gathered her thoughts and deliberately coughed to attract attention because she decided to explain everything. Adventurers, that's what people who take on various assignments from the guild are called. They do it at their own discretion and receive a reward for it, the girl explained. So now everything is clear. They are simply jack-of-all-trades in the era of emptiness, and this was done by the alchemists. While the boy was digesting what he had heard, Beowulf pointed at what he was about to do and advised the newcomer to watch carefully and learn to understand better. Bo chose the task of hunting a giant and dangerous beast that was raging. The announcement had a photo of this beast, and it was truly very frightening. Vaken began to read. A monster terrorized the locals and hunted in the western forest, but he did not manage to finish reading about the reward. The adventurer was already preparing for the mission with his team and assured the rookie that he did not need to count the due reward. Everything would go to Beowulf and his team, and then they would go have fun. The alchemist was surprised. He did not think that a whole group would go on the mission, so after thinking a little, he decided to simply choose another mission. Shirley decided to clarify what class Vaken was, a mage or a warrior. Confident in himself and full of enthusiasm, the boy loudly declared that he is Vaken Ord, the great alchemist. Shirley looked at him in surprise, and the crowd of adventurers fell silent with contempt. The air was filled with this suffocating feeling. While the adventurers sighed irritably, Vaken did not understand at all what was happening and what caused such a strong reaction. The administrator awkwardly pulled out 3 announcements and said that these were the only tasks for the alchemists. The crowd laughed hollowly and he stood confused. How could this be? Why so few? The more they babbled, the more disappointed the alchemist became. Short-sighted adventurers argued about who was even practicing alchemy now, and he did not understand this, probably a newcomer from distant lands. No one answered why the work of alchemists was underestimated, and it was scary to ask. No one just wanted to make a fool of themselves. After reviewing the announcement, Vecin confidently handed Shirley a sheet of paper. He decided to take on this particular order. The administrator warned him that fulfilling the order for the potion that would speed up recovery might prove quite difficult, but added that he has a whole week to figure out all the nuances. Unexpectedly, Vecin found himself surrounded by adventurers from all sides. One even threw his arm over his shoulder. The whole crowd was laughing and mocking him, begging him to complete a task they themselves considered a futile service. When the alchemist, completely puzzled, asked why they were saying all this, the crowd simply burst into loud laughter. How stupid this guy was. Two mages drew attention to themselves by showing their magical abilities and with confident faces declared that now everything is decided by magic and miracles, and mages and clerics are the best support classes. Having finished their speeches and boasting, they added that they did not expect much from the novice. The main thing was that he brewed useful potions and gave them to them. That was the maximum he was capable of. Completely confused, Bacon decided to ask if magic and miracles really were based only on magical and divine power, to which Ken received an affirmative answer. At that time, alchemists believed that problems could only be solved here and now and only for a short time. They could not use universal potions that could be prepared at any time. Everything came together, and this inspired the hero. That was why adventurers grouped together, because alone they would have too many weak spots and vulnerabilities. But these words did not excite the crowd. They surrounded him from all sides, and in the end he found himself pressed against the wall, unable to break out of this ring. Angry warriors shouted so loudly that the echo spread throughout the building and beyond. How could the alchemist have thought to say such a thing? It seemed Vacant should have kept his thoughts to himself. But the crowd of angry adventurers did not quiet down. They continued shouting that the skills of alchemists were nothing compared to magic and miracles, so those guys should quietly brew potions and play with stones. Bacanord was deeply disappointed. Alchemy could have declined so much in those 500 years while he was gone. He remembered a merchant he had seen on the street a few days ago. He was selling cheap healing potions. That was the current standard, and it seemed alchemists were in the worst position imaginable. Hopes shattered under the blows of harsh reality. The hero was certain that alchemy would rise to unprecedented heights and reveal to people many hidden secrets capable of changing the world. The boy sharply turned around and with a serious look headed towards the administrator amid the cries and outrage of the crowd. He placed a box of healing potions on the counter and asked where to hand them in here, while the noisy crowd, which a moment ago loudly scolded him and clearly showed dissatisfaction, now stood in complete confusion. Shirley asked with surprise where so many potions had come from. The alchemist had just accepted the order, but it turned out he had his own secrets. A whole box had been prepared in advance. The travelers still had not calmed down. They could not believe it, because the potion was very difficult to brew. One of them snatched the bottle from Vacant's hands and shouted that it was just soda water in a bottle. The alchemist did not deny it at all. He was confident in his product. The man began to examine the bottle and froze. The potion inside was incredibly beautiful and attracted attention with its bright color and glow. Carefully examining the contents, he confidently stated that this potion most likely would bring no benefit. However, amid the loud and cheerful laughter of the self-confident crowd around him, he boldly and greedily began to swallow this strange liquid. The next moment his face contorted in shock. He suddenly felt a surge of power, powerful, engulfing the whole body, as if energy was trying to break out in a turbulent flow. The medicine turned out to be so effective that the finger the warrior had lost long ago grew back as if nothing had happened. The warrior trembled, examining his hands. He could not comprehend whether it was a dream or reality, because he had never encountered such a potion before. He rushed to the alchemist, eagerly wanting to know how he had prepared such a potion, and Vacant, looking at him in surprise, uttered only one question that made him think, wouldn't it have been better if the finger had not grown back? The traveler shook his head. He bit his lip, trying to hold back tears of joy, but they treacherously ran down his cheeks. He burst into tears like a child and rushed to embrace the emptiness. It turned out that at first he was a hunter. When he lost a finger, he had to change class, but now he can use the bow again. The other adventurers froze, listening to the conversation between the adventurer and the novice. He showered them with thanks and called this healing potion special, capable of curing any ailment. A dreadful silence prevailed, enveloping the room like thick fog. All the adventurers froze and were silent, unable to utter a word. No one expected such a turn of events. All the adventurers, as if on command, turned simultaneously and instantly rushed to the administration desk, knocking each other down and raising clouds of dust from the floor. When the crowd calmed down a bit, Shirley shyly called vacant. Requests for healing potions increased even more, and she put a pile of papers on the table. Wyken exhaled deeply. This, of course, was not what he wanted, but maybe it was even better this way. Although the number of orders frightened him, the crowd buzzed again, and this caught Alchemist's attention. What could it be? A crowd of former aggressive men greedily rubbed their hands, unable to wait until they drank the potion ordered from the alchemist, and their eyes burned as if they were ready to pounce on that man at any moment. Everything was written on their faces, and Zosimus stood bewildered. How could everything turn out this way? Bakenord proudly raised his head and thought, "This is my chance time to show my true alchemical skills." After some time, he wiped the sweat from his face and placed another box of elixirs on the table. It seemed to be the last one, but surprisingly, Bacon quickly dealt with those behind as well. Heavy footsteps sounded near the entrance. They were immediately noticed, and everyone held their breath. Someone, slow but relentless and determined, was approaching the guild doors, and all the faces present instantly turned to the entrance in anticipation. It was the wounded Beowulf, armor covered in blood, hands and even head bleeding. He gritted his teeth, holding back the pain. Disturbed and frightened, Bacon, seeing Bo in such a state, immediately asked what exactly had happened in the war, why he ended up in such a terrible condition. The alchemist looked at Beowulf in surprise, who was staggering into the guild. Every movement of his screamed fatigue. He was covered in blood and carried a heavy sword on his back. The newcomer stood confused. He could not understand what had happened to the experienced adventurer, and could not even imagine how it could have happened. The man, impressed with his courage, despite having to flee from a monster that turned out to be much stronger than they thought, he intended to return to the fight after a short rest to help his comrades. Bacon pulled out one of the healing bottles he had been distributing to the entire guild today and handed it to Beowulf. Pleased with himself, the newly minted adventurer admitted that he had prepared the potion himself. The warrior decisively drank it, thinking that things could hardly get worse. The effect of that potion struck him much more strongly than he could have imagined. At that moment, he felt an instant, powerful surge of strength and energy that filled his entire body. His wounds were completely healed, as if the battle he had desperately fled from had never happened. He looked with surprise at the places where blood had been flowing just a minute ago. When Beowulf turned to ask how the alchemist had done it, the newcomer was already surrounded by an admiring crowd. Everyone was applauding, and he blushed with embarrassment because they were looking at him too intently. The warrior did not fully understand what had happened yet, but he was pleased. Vakin was in the center of attention, and his potion really had healed the wounds and restored the strength lost in battle. He decided to return and help his comrades, but the alchemist stopped him. With a persistent look, he handed over several bottles, offered to take them with him, and assured that they would be very useful. The veteran accepted the help and set off, waving his hand and promising that upon his return they would drink together in honor of the victory. Zosimos expressed hope that the warrior would be able to cope with the monster. The assistant also reported that traces of the Tower of the Sage were found right in the direction of the Western Forest, where battles with monsters are currently taking place. Vacant Oriad was inspired. "This is great news. The Tower of the Sage can be used as a home and at the same time store his alchemical materials and tools there." When the boy was confidently stomping towards the guild exit, Shirley stopped him, assuring the alchemist that he was not going anywhere. It was quite clear Shirley was determined. She directly asked the frightened Vacant if he had read the guild's license agreement, which he had recently joined. Hearing the refusal, the administrator decided that it was time to finally explain in detail to the newly minted adventurer the main rules that apply here. The guild has a strict ranking system, from 10 the lowest to 1 the highest. Tasks are assigned strictly depending on rank and can only be taken according to the current level, so everyone receives work that suits their skills and experience. Vacant was clearly upset to learn that he started at rank 10 and therefore would not be able to go hunting dangerous monsters with Beowulf's team, and Shirley was sure that the alchemist had no place on the front line. The administrator laid out a stack of orders before the boy and made it clear, take any of them but no others. The girl, smiling, took the top sheet of paper and, interested in what was on it, tried to attract the newcomer's attention. Realizing that this was not helping, Shirley carefully approached from behind, lightly poked him in the shoulder and quietly whispered in his ear that if she asked him, who knows, maybe she would even fall in love. Not expecting such pressure, the boy immediately rushed to the exit, fleeing from the threats and leaving the smiling girl behind. While Shirley, pleased with herself, smiled slyly, wondering if she had overdone it, Vacant was already rushing into the western forest. Although the girl desperately pleaded with the alchemist, her words had no effect, and the boy, without hesitation, rushed into the thick forest where the battle raged. What doubts could there be here? After all, if there were even any alchemical materials here, Bacon simply had no right to stay aside. Missing such an opportunity was unacceptable. Zosimos finally figured out his mentor, hinting that he ran away from Shirley funny because he was already over 40, yet still had no girlfriend, and justified it by saying that for a true researcher, women are secondary. The reflections were interrupted when the alchemist arrived at the battle site. The warriors desperately defended themselves from attacks by evil monsters, although there were many more of them. Bacon carefully looked around, trying to fully imagine how critical and difficult the situation was. It seemed that everything was really bad. Beowulf was holding back the monster with all his strength, but his comrades could no longer stand on their feet. From behind the trees appeared the most powerful enemy, the great beast mage, Lesser Tarask. He was simply gigantic, and when he opened his jaws and let out a deafening roar, his very sharp teeth were revealed. Zosimus reviewed the archives and said that this was a new species, and Wacken instantly felt the material he could extract from it would also be new. Beowulf noticed the alchemist and began scolding him. Why did he come here at all? This was no place for novices. The monster was too strong. The alchemist, immersed in his own thoughts, no longer noticed anything around. His face became calm, but a sinister grimace clearly stood out on it, making him gloomy and mysterious. Beowulf tried to stop him, but it was already too late. Wacken quietly muttered under his breath about materials, about how much new good he could get. The next moment he was already ready for battle. The openings in his storage opened again, and 4 shining stones poured out of them. Where would the alchemists begin to look for the monster's weak point? The stones that the boy clenched in his hands had a special nature and meaning. They were not just pebbles, but unique artifacts embodying the 4 main elements. Bacon did not waste time on thoughts and doubts. He immediately decided that the best solution was to throw everything at once. While Beowulf's people watched with open mouths, puzzled, the alchemist threw all 4 stones at the monsters with all his might. Some burned alive in the flames and could not extinguish themselves, some were frozen in ice blocks, some rose into the air like a tornado and with a roar fell back to the ground, and others were unlucky. They were struck by lightning. The travelers did not know what to think. This was not magic, but the influence of the objects, a power they probably had never encountered before. Wacken did not even think about stopping. He continued to throw stones, from which Beowulf and his team barely managed to dodge. Only when the clearing was strewn with the bodies of defeated monsters did the alchemist finally stop, and the roar of pain that had sounded earlier gradually subsided, dissolving into the air. The boy did not even have time to understand what the weakness of these monsters was. They turned out to be too fragile, but the surprise did not leave the faces of the adventurers. Giggling, the satisfied alchemist decided that fire was indeed the most effective. He did not even notice how terrifying he looked at that moment, completely immersed in his thoughts and contemplative admiration. But now the warriors were gripped by complete horror at his presence. He really seemed unexpectedly frightening to them. Bacon turned his head, still with the same eerie grin, and directed his gaze at the last monster left alive after his elemental stones. He stood right in front of the huge, loudly roaring monster, showing no trace of fear and not flinching from its piercing roar, as if it were a real challenge and was ready to fight. Circles appeared on the floor from which streams of light burst forth and surrounded the alchemist. What was the weakness of this monster? How to attack it? The boy was about to find out all this. From the circles, along with the light, magical swords of all elements began to emerge. Vacant darkened. He was clearly interested in what this huge monster was capable of. In a moment, the boy pulled out a magical tool and reliable weapon from his stash, the alchemist's staff. Having drawn it, he immediately swung and gave himself the command to start. All the swords he had drawn instantly aimed their tips at the monster, ready for the decisive strike. The next moment, they simultaneously rushed in one direction, moving at the speed of light. Dozens of swords instantly fell upon the small Tarask, and the monster could only helplessly growl in pain. But the monster turned out to be no ordinary one and still stood firmly on its feet, unexpectedly surprising not only the alchemist, who had expected a greater effect, but also the entire team of adventurers watching in confusion and shock. With one sharp jerk, Vacant cut off the head of the monster, who was the leader of this group, and at the same time the last one remaining. The huge body and head crashed to the ground with a terrible rumble, flooding it with oozing blood. The monster was definitely defeated. The travelers simply froze with open mouths and watched everything that was happening. How could this alchemist do all this, and at such a young age? And the scariest thing about all this was that the first generation of alchemists 500 years ago went out alone and gathered materials, rather than just sitting in laboratories and brewing potions. And this monster became just another victim of one of the most dangerous alchemists, Vaken Orda. A smile never left his face as, armed with a sharp knife, he carefully and greedily carved out valuable and rare material needed for his dangerous experiments. Soon Bacon was already in the tavern dancing duck. Suddenly, a bag filled with coins fell onto the table with a ringing slap, and they scattered across the table, creating even more noise. The alchemist looked away from his work and asked Beowulf what money he had spilled. He replied that it was part of the reward for killing the lesser Tarrasque, although the boy only had materials he had gathered himself. The traveler shook his head, sharing the deserved reward was one of the main rules of adventurers, so he was not going to back down. The warrior made a deal with the administrator, saying that Vaken was only a temporary participant, although it was not his task. Without further argument, he took the money and decided to invest it in opening a laboratory. While the boy was thanking Beowulf for the funding, he suddenly became interested in what exactly the alchemist was brewing. The alchemist blossomed with joy and decided to immediately show his creation. Bacon was inventing a stove that did not require firewood. He proudly showed his creation. The stove had 40 temperature settings, a fire protection system, and a heat-saving function. Beowulf had already begun to brush off the persistent stories about the boy who just wanted to leave in this tavern, the embodiment of alchemist's wisdom, when suddenly Theo entered. This is what an empty cauldron is. The girl smiled happily, folding her arms on her chest, as if filled with joy when she saw this incredible invention. Seeing such a reaction, the alchemist pointed at the stove with his hands and offered the girl to use his creation, hoping she would rush to hug him in gratitude. It seems Vacant was mistaken somewhere. This joy was directed not at him nor at his creation, but at Beowulf. The girl approached him and asked what he was doing here. His disappointment was indescribable. The waitress, to the boy's disappointment, was bustling around Beowulf and inviting him to have a snack in the tavern. Vacant, puzzled, asked how Theo knew Beowulf. The boy was stunned. The girl said that he was the strongest adventurer in the city, and that was why everyone knew him. The alchemist suddenly found himself in an unexpected situation and was confused. Not hiding his displeasure, he puffed out his cheeks and muttered something incomprehensible about Beowulf's popularity. But the city was not talking about Beowulf. All thoughts were about the mysterious alchemist of incredible power, whose potions could cure anything. Soon Beowulf and the Viking headed to the Guild of Adventurers of Sullivan. Suddenly, as soon as they approached the entrance, a whole crowd of people rushed at them. Everyone begged the alchemist to join their groups. They were even ready to fight for the right to take him into their team and use his abilities for their own purposes. All because rumors about the great alchemist, who had unparalleled knowledge and talents, spread instantly, and although he received dozens of offers, he refused them all. He had a passionate, determined desire to open his own laboratory where he could implement his ideas and projects, and was ready to accept anyone who wanted to help him with this. Beowulf helped that man disperse the restless crowd by sending them to Shirley's table. Warriors and mages rushed to leave their requests at the reception. But it turned out that he was doing this not with good intentions at all. The traveler carefully pulled out a letter of assignment and invited Vacant to join his team for this mission. Beowulf wore the most pleading facial expression, hoping to convince Ken, but it seemed his efforts hardly worked. Ken remained unmoved. The offer did not at all mean that the alchemist had to join the ranks of the Black Dogs. That was the name of that group of veterans. And just when the warrior was enthusiastically talking about the essence of the task, which concerned an important escort mission and was supposed to be incredibly tense, someone who had just entered the guild suddenly interrupted him. Those who dared to do this turned out to be Vive, the mage of the Black Dog. At first glance, it was clear that he had no intention of participating in the mission with the alchemist, especially such a young one. Vive proudly declared that if he had been with the Black Dogs during their clash with the monsters, they would have handled it themselves, and childish help would have been only a burden to them. Approaching Vacant, the mage looked at him so aggressively, as if he wanted to pierce the enemy cover with his gaze. To clearly show his attitude, Vive sharply and loudly ordered the alchemist to get out of here. The commander of the Black Dog tried to calm his mage, but he did not even want to listen. He just shouted that he was tired of babysitting stupid and helpless adventurers. Vive considered alchemists the biggest parasites in this world. He waved his magic wand and sent a whirlwind straight at Vaken. Fortunately, the boy reacted instantly and managed to dodge. While everyone tried to calm the mage who was destroying everything in the guild, the boy was simply amazed at why alchemists were so hated in this world. It always upset him terribly. And yet Vaken suggested to Vive to talk and discuss everything. Although he himself had already destroyed half the guild, the wizard did not even think about listening to the alchemist. He, like hundreds of others, could not take responsibility for the mirror space. Mirror space is a unique idea. There exists a world that is an exact copy of our real world. Once alchemists conducted large-scale experiments in such worlds because their complex and often superpowerful weapons were sometimes difficult to test under real conditions. And finally, Beowulf lifted the veil of secrecy and explained what caused Vive's fierce anger. Due to an unfortunate accident, his older sister was forever locked in the mirror space. The wizard confirmed the words of his commander. When his sister was only slightly interested in the Academy of Magic, she was snatched away and dragged off. They immediately began testing on her an artifact called the Darby Mirror. It seems this artifact was discarded about 500 years ago. How did it end up in our era again? Vave became more and more enraged. His sister would never return and would remain there forever, and no alchemist dared to take responsibility for this. The wizard was already suffocating but did not even think of stopping. He swung again into the void as if striking, and kept insisting that he wanted to get rid of every alchemist. The boy simply grabbed his hand firmly, trying to hold it back to avoid further blows. Despite the fiery passions and rage literally bursting from his opponent, Vaken remained incredibly calm and even smiled at Vave, who was boiling with anger. The alchemist decided that he definitely needed help. The mage became even angrier. What could this boy do? Vave had given his whole life to become a mage and find his sister, and learned that for this he needed the sacred bell of Fulcanelli. Travelers had heard of such an invention only in fairy tales, so Vave fell into despair. He realized that his little sister would remain there forever. If only he had that spell, he would definitely be able to bring back his older sister. The mage, overwhelmed with grief and despair, could no longer hold back tears. He grabbed his head, feeling his heart breaking. While the other adventurers sympathized with their comrade, Beacon probably had his own opinion. Smiling slyly, he put his hand into his pocket. From there he took out the sacred bell of Fulcanelli and, smiling, handed it to Vave. It seemed like mockery rather than a joke. The wizard had been searching for a way to save his sister for so long, and the boy did it so easily, just pulled out a bell from his pocket that did not even exist in this world. The alchemist explained that it was indeed the sacred bell of Fulcanelli, but Vave, along with the commander of the Black Dogs, only became angrier at what they heard. They perceived it as cruel mockery, unacceptable in their serious situation. Then Viking also took out a mirror as if about to demonstrate something, and to pull out those who got stuck and rescue during accidents. The sacred bell of Fulcanelli was created. When the theory of mirror space was first presented, they created a bunch of different artifacts that did not work properly, and because of this many accidents happened. Preparing to use this mysterious artifact, Vaken took a deep breath. Inside him, irritation and disappointment were growing because everything happening around clearly upset him. In his time, this spell was cast on every corner, so it is strange that the Royal Academy, one of the most prestigious universities, cannot solve such a seemingly simple problem. The boy sank even deeper into thoughts and, with the help of the bell, continued to search for the girl in the mirror space. The obsessive thought whether he would succeed in reviving alchemy in this world did not give him peace. The alchemist found her, pulled her into this world, and the room exploded with bright, dazzling light from the mirror. The boy sharply jerked his hand, putting all his strength into the movement to pull the girl closer to this world. In the bright light, the silhouette of the girl gradually emerged as if she was slowly rising from the mirror, surrounded by that amazing and majestic glow. When the girl fully flew into this world, the mirror shattered into small, sharp shards that whirled around the room with a rumble, flashed sparks, and made the atmosphere even more mysterious. The girl's cheeks were slightly flushed and she seemed to be sound asleep. A light breeze, raised by the mirror shards flying in all directions, barely tousled her hair. No one in the room expected this. Only Vacant smiled confidently. He did it again. The girl fell right onto her savior, but he, fortunately, caught her successfully. He was ready for such a turn of events and thereby saved her from possible injuries and consequences of the fall. Vacant explains to sopping Vave that although he saved his sister by finding her in the mirror world, she is now very weak and needs a week of rest, after which she will be able to live as before again. He gave the girl to his weeping brother, unable to believe that all this was really happening to him. He had long given up and fixated only on revenge against everyone he considered guilty. Vavai could not hold back his feelings and sobbed without stopping. He was overwhelmed with joy, for he had finally met again his dear, beloved older sister, whom he had not seen for so long. The crowd of adventurers standing aside and watching was both touched and shocked by what was happening. What else could they do? What would he surprise them with next time? The wizard, feeling the full weight of his actions, fell to his knees and begged forgiveness for his contempt towards the young alchemist. Although he was over 40, he poured out thanks and apologies without measure. Bacon was satisfied with the completed work and only smiled sympathetically at Vavai. Suddenly Beowulf interrupted this so touching conversation and announced that they were setting out tomorrow on the mission he had spoken about earlier. A little later, the adventurers, tired after a hard day, were resting at the Dancing Duck, and Fio was clearly dissatisfied. She puffed her cheeks childishly, sulked, and looked with an empty, offended gaze, as if waiting for him to react to her displeasure. Ken tried to explain that Beo had forced him to go with them, but the girl only snorted and turned away. How could he deceive her? He had promised to go with her to the party tomorrow. One of the adventurers watching this scene burst out laughing loudly. He had never seen Fio like this. Apparently she really liked the alchemist. The girl bit her lip in embarrassment, but when Zosimo suggested stepping aside, she could not hold back. The next day, already in the morning, the adventurers stood on the street, all preparations behind them, and they were ready to get down to business. But suddenly he was interrupted by the shout of a man in glasses, a scientist of the Royal Academy of Gazara, who with passionate dissatisfaction and indignation declared that the participation of the alchemist in the expedition was completely unacceptable to him. While Vaken awkwardly scratched his head, Bayo tirelessly insisted, convincing the experienced scientist that the decision to take the alchemist with them would be extremely successful and later he would not regret his choice. Jezar, clenching his teeth in rage and indignation, growled decisively. He was not to be considered a dull, naive child, and he declared that alchemists were merely vulgar pseudo-competitors of real scientists. Captain Cherpaniksov assured that they would not leave without this boy, and then the scientist could set off alone without their escort. Zosimos carefully poked his master's head. He wanted to warn him about the premonition that this mission would be dangerous, but that was exactly why Ken agreed to go with Beo's team. It was a mission to escort Professor Jezar to the ossuary tower in the ruins near the Dunatek River basin, and after the rainy season, monsters swarmed around this place. The conditions were too unsuitable for reconnaissance with a group of civilians. However, after the rainy season, many plants and seafood could be found there. The civilian thought he might find something useful. That man himself tried to convince the scientist that there was no reason to worry, and persistently assured him that in the future he would not interfere with his important research. Gazar angrily waved his hand in his opinion. Such obvious things did not need to be said. No alchemist could interfere with his noble research. The dissatisfied scientist reminded him, time is money, time to get to work, and slowly headed to the cart. The alchemist sighed with relief, and Bayav, patting him on the shoulder, followed Jezar. The long-awaited journey finally began, and several people set off with enthusiasm, but so far they had only covered a small part of the planned route. Ken was talking with his assistant. They had not ridden in a cart for a long time. They often used fast teleportation, and sometimes it was a real pleasure just to relax like that. The conversation was interrupted when Oscar from the Black Dogs squad jumped out of the cart. With a joyful smile, he greeted Wayne and hoped they would manage to establish fruitful cooperation. He decided to ask Ken if he minded a simple and casual form of address. After all, they were both from the same guild, which meant friends and comrades. Oscar's sister, Miss Cal, threatened her brother, "Don't you dare relax, we are at work." Vave, on the contrary, told the alchemist to relax a little because he was with the Black Dogs. But Miss Cal was right. Zosmos informed his master that a group was approaching from the right edge of the road, and Ken immediately notified the Black Dogs, but they did not even leave the road. In just a few minutes, the carriage found itself surrounded by armed bandits from all sides who acted quickly and cohesively. What they demanded was quite ordinary for the people of their world, who lived exactly like that. They sought something truly valuable and important, but at the same time threatened instant death to everyone in the carriage without any exceptions. Overcome with fear and confusion, the scientist quickly hid behind the backs of the brave adventurers, who were clearly displeased and outraged by this unexpected encounter. While the bandits laughed maliciously, the team of Black Dogs quickly climbed out of the cart and immediately lined up, ready to repel any threat and protect Hazar. While the scientist panicked, Beale was already thinking about battle tactics. He turned to Vaken and suggested taking on 2 of them, but the alchemist was once again lost in thought and completely ignored the others. That man insisted that the bandits had not changed at all, and even after 500 years all they knew was how to rob and kill. Ken stopped arguing and turned back to Beowulf. With a completely blank expression, Ken finally asked if it is a crime to put someone to sleep forever. While Bo stood confused, the confident bandits laughed and rushed to attack the adventurous. Those who fear punishment should not even raise weapons. With a sudden, unexpected strike when no one expected Vaken to do anything, he without the slightest hesitation cut off the head of one of the bandits who was about to attack him, and blood splattered in all directions. The alchemist confidently said that he was not afraid of any punishment, just wanted to know the true price of each of their lives. Bandits were frozen in place as if their feet were rooted to the ground. Ken, feeling the tension rise, sighed heavily. It seemed he would have to deal with problems again. He aimed his staff at the bandits and threatened grimly. Their only chance was to pray. If they did not want to die, they had to fall to their knees and apologize to him 100 times. Gazar was in shock. He fell on his buttocks, his body trembling with fear, and he asked what all this was about. The main hero stood with a weapon in his hand. Around him, dozens of fallen enemies who showed no sign of life. Vaken, a little embarrassed, admitted that he probably shocked the professor a bit, then asked how many people he needed to resurrect. The man behind him was still trembling with fear. Zosim approached Vaken and said that it seemed they could still be revived, to which Vaken replied gloomily that it was sad. According to the 30-minute rule, a person can be brought back with the help of secret potions, but success depends on the condition of the corpse. Acquaintances said that he stood out again, but he was a good person, he could manage without them. The main hero apologized to them and said that next time he would choose a different way. After some time, their carriage moved on. They were traveling through the plains, and Gazar was still trembling with fear, biting his lower lip. He apologized, saying he had really overdone it a bit, to which he was told not to pay attention. Aristocrats are always cowards because they won't lift a finger themselves, only sitting in their chairs. At that moment, Zosim interrupted them, turned to Vaken, addressed him as Sir, and said that he had done what he was asked. The main hero sincerely thanked him. The assistant smiled and said he was too kind. At that moment, the enemies came to their senses. Zosimo said that everyone should have already come to their senses. Moreover, he looked into their heads and did not think they would follow the path of a bandit. They can ask him not to say this because they are also human, and if they made a mistake once, they can repeat the same mistake a second time. The hero pondered how in his era people repeatedly ignited wars, using weapons created by alchemists to kill each other. Even the bandits armed themselves with alchemist weapons. He was wrong, too naively thinking that this would not happen. Meanwhile, he continued to lead the cart. The main character dived into his thoughts and sadness appeared on his face. He thought about how many times he had already been wrong. At the same time, the commander turned to the professor and asked if he understood why they had taken Vaken with them. The professor nodded, and the boy immediately added that there was still a long way ahead, so he should prepare himself. In the rainy season, there is a sea of water here. You can't go further by carriage, so they abandoned the cart and went on foot. Soon they will encounter a giant crab monster, and all together they will rush into battle with it. Behind the last enemy, a gigantic slime will lurk for them, and after it, large water insects will appear. All of this looks terrible. As soon as night falls, hordes of skeletons will emerge. These monsters will surround them, and it will be difficult for them to resist. But to achieve victory, the main hero will use his weapon. From it will burst a huge energy barrier that with its power will destroy all enemies, and the professor was shocked. At that moment, the man was asked again if he was glad they took the main character with them. He was already angry and said he understood how cool he was, and the other man replied that the biggest problem was still ahead. Everything here is foggy because of the rainy season. They had to wait until it cleared up, so they decided to eat, and everyone agreed. Gizar said that they spoke like that, they needed to leave faster. Did they really think he was just in such a hurry? They replied that they were worried about his safety, and the man just shrugged. We are adventurers, so we had to come up with something. Another man stepped aside and said that the professor seemed obsessed with his work. Bacon asked if the research was really that important. They replied that he was like studying the history of magic, and this interested Bacon. After some time, they finally reached a new structure. It turned out to be a tower, an ossuary. They rejoiced that they were finally here, and the main character at that moment was sure. Without any doubt, these were the ruins of the Tower of the Wise. The team turned to the professor and warned that there might be monsters ahead, so it was not worth rushing forward, then asked if he understood, to which Gazar sharply replied, "What are you saying? I have no time." He had to quickly solve the mystery of this tower and earn a place in the academy. After that, the man rushed to the building, and the others only thought about how much trouble he had caused, and Vaken wondered why he did not make it in time. He was told that this tower disappears immediately after the end of the rainy season. No one knows why this happens, and Vaken said that he understood everything, thinking to himself that perhaps some functions of the Tower of the Wise still work. Could it really be fog everywhere here? It is made of bones, radically filling the tower with bones instead of knowledge. The hero turned to Zosima and said that he had already started acting, to which he replied that he was beginning to restore the archive. Bacon thought that these were the ruins of the former Water City Donate. Once art and tourism flourished here, but now only pitiful ruins remained instead of buildings. There were ruined walls and fallen columns. In a moment the hero felt some currents in the air. Zosima addressed him, to which Vaken said that he himself noticed something in the air, and then his assistant suggested retreating now. The main hero said that Nushi once lived here long ago. If he is still here even after 500 years, then this is a real trouble. Bacon's gaze became very focused, but he was terribly nervous looking at the monster in front of him. He realized this will not be easy. The main heroes shouted BO that they needed to flee immediately. A huge monster was already approaching. The men asked him again, was this his premonition again? If Bacon was so scared, then it was definitely something dangerous. The boy said that if they were noticed, it would definitely be dangerous. They shouted to Oscar, and this colonel told them to go away because they were going to retreat. The professor began shouting about what nonsense they were talking about. Then one of the escorts asked him if he didn't understand what was important right now. Bale asked what happened to Gizar. The main character thought to himself that he was a researcher and could be understood. Zosima said there was no time, the monster would be here soon. At that moment the monster burst out from under the ground again. Pieces of the surface flew in all directions. His acquaintances were shocked by what was happening. It was a giant monster, the donut deathworm. Everyone shouted that they had never seen such creatures. Someone said they were very disgusting. Besides the huge monster, small worms also appeared. Bacon said these were his children. We need to be careful. He also warned they are all incredibly voracious and very fierce. There are more than 100 of them, so we need to run away from the dirt and water right now. His friend asked if they could even cope with them. After that, he called out to the professor. The bald man said that Geyser, escaping from the monsters, rushed to a ruined building that looked very dangerous, and everyone asked him about it in shock. Zosima said that in battle it would have been better for him to be with them, but now he had fled and that was bad. The main character agreed but thought to himself that he could not just leave him to die. His conscience would not allow it. Vaken clenched his fist and said decisively that he had no choice. Then a voice sounded from behind, saying that he really had no choice. He was afraid. It turned out to be his friend the commander. He asked if he was really ready to risk his life for someone who spits on the lives of his escorts, and he said they were leaving right now. To this, the main character said that this guy was quite dry. Zosima added that it was indeed a wise decision for a commander, and Vaken said he would try to do everything himself. The main character shouted to the others, run to the tower, to the ossuary. I will use dangerous artifacts. These words shocked everyone. In the palms of the main character suddenly appeared a tiny magical seal. He seriously said that he would figure out what to do with this creature. The commander asked what he intended to do alone. Another man agreed and said it was impossible, but Vaken once again insistently asked to hear his request. Acquaintances told him, do not dare to die. If it gets too hot, run. Meanwhile, they were clearing their way, destroying the worm's children. Zosima said that Bayo decided to cut him a path for retreat. It seems they have already become comrades. The main character agreed and replied that it does look that way. After this, Vaken noticed the monster, shouted to it that he would become its opponent, took out an artifact, handheld explosive rockets, and launched an attack. Almost immediately he threw this artifact straight at the enemy and shouted to him, catch. The strike hit the target. He reported this. The guy was wildly delighted, but then something completely unexpected happened. The worm begins to suck air into its mouth, then wildly attacks it. He did not expect this, so he swore loudly. The beam was directed straight at him. The commander and the rest of the crew shouted his name. No one understood what was happening to him, and through the smoke only the silhouette of Viking was visible. In a few moments the smoke dissipated as if the main character had removed a transparent fabric. It turned out to be Fania's silks, a super thin magical material that instantly hardens upon impact. Vaken said he had little of it, so he had to be careful, but then he dared to do otherwise and drank the hero's potion, which significantly enhances physical abilities. After that, he threw the bottle with the elixir back, not even looking back, looked determined, and said that the fight begins. The main character began to circle around the monster. It turned out to be incredibly fast, and the worm fired a beam at his side again, but the boy managed to dodge. But it turned out Bacon decided to use his trick and the worm's body exploded. Acquaintances said it was incredible, and now they understood why he asked to step back. The professor asked if it was the alchemist's power. The main character thought that the defense was strong and the blows hardly got through if he didn't have to finish the fight. Maybe it would have turned out that way, but would he really have to use it? At that moment, Zosimo's asked how he could help, and Bacon replied that the most important thing was not to let weaklings near him. His assistant said he understood. At that moment, his cubic body shone, rays scattered in all directions, thereby destroying the worm's children. Many enemies were defeated. Bacon asked when Zosimo's managed to learn magic, and then added that it was thanks to him that he was able to complete his studies and he has something special for him. A small dark sphere began to appear in his hands, and holding it, he stepped away from the spikes thrown out by the worm, but one of them still scratched his face. The main character was terribly angry about this, holding the rage inside himself. Suddenly, he threw the sphere straight at the worm. After that, he said that everything was ready. Bacon himself did not close his eyes for a minute, and then everything around was covered in smoke. In an instant, the smoke dispersed, and it turned out that everything around, even the monster itself, was frozen in ice crystals. The artifact, using the movement of surrounding molecules, created absolute zero. Everyone started asking what that was and how everything turned around in an instant. Zosimo said that he had to use a bunch of artifacts, and he didn't think that Vacant would have to use ice drops. At this, the main character closed his eyes, took out a weapon, and said that nothing could be done. The enemy was serious, but they dealt with him without human losses. Bacon threw his staff straight at the worm. The staff hit the body, and the worm crumbled into small pieces. All the men were shocked by what he did. The broken worm began to fall to the ground in pieces, breaking even more. The main hero stood among these blocks. On Waken's face shone a wide red smile. In his hands he held a magic stone and said that the stone they would get from the worm could be worth much more than the one in his hands. He had a burning desire to create, and as if the whole world at that moment was painted in bright colors. The professor called him by name. The main character turned around and joyfully said that he was alive, and the man replied that alchemists are truly capable of such things. In response to his words, Bacon sharply replied that this is not a contest of who is better, who is worse, and alchemists are also capable of much. To this, the professor happily smiled and said he had opened his eyes, thanked him for it, and the others were shocked by his words. It was completely unexpected. Gazar glanced at the frozen sculptures and whispered that Talos, the demon king who mastered all the deep secrets of magic, did not think he would be able to see this. The hero felt that some unfamiliar name had slipped out, although it was strangely familiar, just did not remember it because it was 500 years ago. At that moment, Bayo turned to Bacon and asked what they would do now. Bacon asked what he was even talking about and then added, what to do with the report for the guild. To this, the main character said that everything was very bad. In his mind, he agreed Beowulf was absolutely right, and then a monster appeared that no one had ever seen, but the alchemist immediately defeated it. Bacon thought that as soon as they found out about this, he would probably be called to the royal capital. A new day began, the fighting ended, and everyone returned to the city. Suddenly, someone called the main character and asked if he had a minute. He immediately turned around. The boy in the cloak said that lately everyone has been hearing about Vacant, to which the other hesitated and asked who he was, and the boy asked again. Then he said with a slight smile that his name was Teresk. Unlike him, he was a simple alchemist. He recalled his previous meetings with this guy. Then the latter said that he had just eaten moose, the cheapest ingredients one could find, and these memories made him uneasy. Vakin said that he got the job thanks to him, so he sincerely thanked him for that time. Then Tarisk added that now everyone was talking about him. That guy smiled very slyly and said that he just wanted to ask a question to their new rising star. The main character asked him again what exactly the question was, and Tarisk's gaze instantly changed. Tarisk extended his hand and asked him how he saw this world, and Vakin froze at these words and did not know what to say. The main character said that he did not understand the meaning of this question. Tarisk replied that he was simply curious to know the opinion of an alchemist. Vakin felt sadness. Being an alchemist like them, it hurt him to see how they were treated. The culture of alchemy had died out, magic had flourished, and as an alchemist he could not say that he liked it. However, the main character did not like how he looked at him, and in general he was standing too close. Then Bacon began shaking his hands in front of him and said that he was not so different from him, he was just doing everything he could. Tarrasque was surprised by his words. Then the guy asked again, "Are you really saying that you have no complaints?" To which the main character nodded and calmly said that everything was fine. Tarrasque smiled sweetly at him as if he thought to himself emptily that he had not yet convinced him. Aloud he said that alchemists always do only one thing, and the guy immediately asked what exactly he meant. The main character smiled slightly at him and calmly said that thanks to alchemy they create a better future. And Bacon, smiling broadly, asked Tarrasque if he thought the same, and added that all alchemists work for a common goal. He blushed from this. At first he didn't even know what to answer. Then the boy smiled and said that Vacant was right exactly. They all aspired to create a better future. Tarrasque turned around while walking away and quietly told Vacant that he had a dream, and someday he would like to share it with him. The boy thanked him for the conversation. The protagonist did not expect this and did not know what to say. Zosimos asked what he was going to say to him, and Vacant replied that he had no idea at all. However, he reminded him of old alchemist friends. The assistant agreed and admitted that he was a bit confused and radiated eccentricity, to which he indignantly replied that it was rude they could not be put on the same level. After some time, the main character held an envelope in his hands. Surprise lit up his face and he asked, "Did I really receive an invitation?" To this, Mila Shirley and the guild confirmed his words and said that this was an invitation from His Majesty and the Royal Academy of Sciences. The main character said with an indifferent expression that he was not interested and asked to throw it away, but the girl replied that it was impossible. She did not remain silent. She said that one does not refuse a royal invitation, to which he replied confusedly that he was a simple, petty adventurer and did not understand what was wanted from him. Shirley explained that she doubted whether a simple little adventurer could defeat the legendary monster that had not appeared since the founding of the country, and that was exactly why he received the invitation. Empty, just Bick. Other adventurers gathered around him, all loudly claiming that he had performed a feat again and was even invited to the capital. After all, getting an audience with the king is such an honor. Zosimos said that it all looked as if that professor was talking about him in the capital, to which Bacon recalled his face and agreed with his assistant. He once again addressed Shirley and said that he really did not want to go to the capital. Could he refuse the offer? She replied that he could not, so they would pay for his carriage and hotel in the capital. The girl also said that if he talked too much, he might be put in a carriage with iron bars, to which Bacon replied that this is how criminals are transported. He understood that arguing was pointless. He asked Shirley again if the invitation extended to anyone who would come with him. She replied that accommodation would be paid for those he took with him, and guards could also be paid for. After some time, the main character went out into the city. He looked very thoughtful, and Zosim asked what he was thinking about. To this, Bacon smiled and said that he would take the opportunity and go on a trip with Theo. He had recently broken his promise to go to a party. Zosim said that was very cunning, to which the main character replied that there was one problem, and the assistant instantly looked at him as if mentally asking a question. The main character explained that he had never before invited a girl on an adventure, to which Zosimos replied that he was chaste. Wacken paid no attention and said he had an idea. He showed the assistant the perfect plan, a 6-step process to convince the girl to go with him, the first of which was to create a pleasant atmosphere, and Bacon was glowing with excitement about this idea. The heroes thought that all this would be natural and not strange at all. This is definitely the perfect plan. After some time, the hero finally reached Theo. She smiled gently and called him by name, wanted to sincerely rejoice at his return, but her words suddenly stopped. Wacken jumped up to her, grabbed her by the shoulders, and suddenly said that they needed to set off on a journey together. The girl was shocked by his words and simply asked him again. After some time, the main character roared, grabbed his head, and cursed his perfect plan had failed. Zosimos also confirmed and said it was a complete failure, and Theo froze and did not understand what was happening. And after a few days, they set off on the road together. The girl was shining with happiness. She called him and gladly said that in the next town there was a hot spring. He smiled and kindly asked her if that was really so, and then suggested going there and buying materials for alchemy. Zosim turned to him and said that somehow they even enjoyed the trip to the capital, to which he replied that he was truly glad, and then he recalled Theo's and her father's reaction. Bacon said that Edgar had given his consent, so he was sincerely grateful to him, and added that maybe they should thank the king for accepting this invitation. The The main character sighed. Zosimo said that an invitation from King Seliori 500 years ago would have been a real disaster. Bacon immediately remembered the past. When he was invited to a meeting with the then king, he was filled with pride. But in the end, they only talked about money and politics, and the king turned out to be a boring man who did nothing but offend him with his alchemy plans. The aristocrats around him were exactly the same. They saw alchemy only as a tool for their vile goals. Then the main character recalled his feelings at that moment. He was overwhelmed only by disgust, and he still remembers it very clearly. At that moment, Fio shouted to him, "Are you listening to me?" Then added, "Hot springs of beauty, these are the hot springs of beauty." He replied that of course he was listening to her. The girl continued and said that even appearance becomes better when you immerse yourself in them. If she dives there, she will attract so many clients. The main character looked ahead and with a smile said that Fio was already very sweet, and the girl was shocked by his words. A thought flashed through Viken's mind that women are naturally drawn to beauty. 500 years ago, there were many orders for serums and potions for beauty. Maybe make something for Fio too, and she blushed with shame at that. The main hero asked her if she felt nauseous, then added with surprise that it was strange the potion he had prepared for her should have worked for another day. Fio smiled and said that everything was fine. When he complimented her, it seemed to her as if her heart would jump out of her chest, and he added that if she needed more potion he could give some in about 30 minutes, but still did not recommend it. Zosimo flew up to the girl and asked her to forgive the dull carelessness of her master, and she just laughed and said that this was typical Ken. The assistant flew closer to the main heroine and whispered that she should know he would not just throw compliments at a girl in such a new place. The main hero decisively said that he only tells the truth. Fio really is very sweet and could quite possibly become a model. Then Zosim asked what he meant by the word sweet. He replied that he had no clear ideas on how to define female beauty. For him, an expressive face, cherry lips, a gentle gaze, brown eyes, and hair like sun rays are important. Our hero still has a lot on his mind, but everything he likes depends on himself, and if it is Fio, then yes, he can be quite biased. Bacon admitted that she drives him crazy with attraction, so he cannot be objective. He scratched his chin, a gentle smile appeared on his face, and he said, "If I say that Fio is sweet, then she is sweet." The main hero continued to ponder this question. It was clear that he took it very seriously. At that moment, Fio, whose face was very red with embarrassment, said that he might not continue. Wacken glanced at her without turning his head. At first, the girl sat quietly, then covered her face with her hands. He also looked away at the road ahead of him. And then it dawned on him he had said all this just in front of Fio. At that moment, Zosimo thanked him for the detailed explanation, and the boy instantly blushed and began to apologize to her. The girl looked at him with pain and asked if he had really lied. He looked at her stunned. Bacon turned away from her and said no, adding that it was too honest, so he asked to forget half of it, to which she replied that she would not do that. She folded her hands in front of her face and shyly said that she was glad he opened up to her and told her about his feelings. The main character was still puzzled. A week passed. Zosimo informed him that they would soon reach the capital, so they needed to prepare. They reached the royal capital Juri, and Fio, enchanted by the city's glow, exclaimed that it was so beautiful here and everything seemed to shine. After which she immediately suggested enjoying the capital and going shopping, and the guardian asked her about the king. Then Wacken grabbed her hand and smiled, saying there was no problem, he was in no hurry to interfere in politics, and the king barely had time to meet with some alchemist. Fio rushed to argue with him, insisting that it was an audience with the king, but he coldly replied that he did not care. At that moment, the guards called him by name and asked what his name was. The lady greeted him and said that he would be escorted because His Majesty was already waiting. These words upset Wacken, and Fio wished him luck. After some time, they finally reached the castle. The main character was led to the hall. The king of the kingdom of Juri, Janus III, and his subordinates were already there. Wacken greeted them and said that he had just come after finishing work, adding that he was an alchemist and his name was Wacken Ord. One of the men in glasses said that opening one's mouth without permission is disrespectful. The one with the empty gaze thought that introducing oneself was once considered good manners, and he apologized aloud and asked to start over. Then the king, without taking his eyes off him, sternly asked if it was true that he simply defeated the legendary monster. To this, Wacken replied that it was not true at all, and he himself thought that the monster was by no means legendary but quite ordinary, appearing through some kind of pattern. Then the king asked him if it was just a rumor. The main character explained that unfortunately he lives in a remote village and does not know what people in the city are talking about. At that moment, one of the king's subordinates shouted loudly, "What kind of disrespect is this? He doesn't even kneel before the king himself and still answers with a smug smile." Wakan pondered, have the rules of politeness changed again? He admitted aloud that he came from a village and really does not know etiquette. If he had been warned in advance, he would have at least prepared. In a moment, the main character fell to his knees and asked if everything was all right now, and his subordinates froze in shock. The boy asked what he wanted from him. Wakan added that if he had any requests, he could turn to the Adventurers Guild, and it is there that they would decide how much to pay for his services. The king said he had heard that the main character brews and sells magical potions, and asked which ones he could make. The hero replied that he could make many different kinds and inquired what exactly was needed. After that, Wakan raised his eyes to the king. The king was also looking at him, and at that moment the boy asked if by any chance a potion against hair loss was needed. The king became angry because of these words, and the main character was thrown into prison. He ended up behind bars. Zosimo said that this was a complete failure. He hoped that his master would be executed quickly. To this, Wakan replied that he was in no hurry to die, he was simply Krento-oriented, and he immediately understood what people's problems were. The main character asked the assistant if he would come back for him to order the potion, to which he replied that it would probably happen in about 3 days, but there was no certainty that he would be released. Vaken said he did not want to sit here and suggested leaving. Zosim asked how he planned to escape. The guy wondered if a quick transfer would work and heard a no in response. The assistant stated that he could make a fuss saying he was going to escape from prison, to which Bacon waved it off, saying there was little use in that. Then he suggested approaching the problem positively, and suddenly a shining object appeared in his hands. The main character said he would brew the king a potion against hair loss and then the king would definitely forgive him. Zosimos replied that this was quite a mature answer, because he thought the guy wanted to kill everyone and escape, and the guy was outraged by these words. Vaken added that he was worried not only about his hair, he was also very tired. Zosimos said that in this primitive era there were no artificial fairies, so it was no wonder he was so tired. The main character said that in his time everyone had their own artificial fairy. The assistant agreed and said that people lived better then. Then Vacant suggested making an artificial fairy for the king, to which Zosimos remarked, "Isn't that overdoing it?" He thought the potion would be enough, and Vacant agreed, after which he immediately set to work on the creation. At first the main character closed his eyes and folded his hands in front of his face, then suddenly opened them and said that everything needed to be prepared. After some time the potion was ready and Zosim lit up. This was great news as befits such a master. He asked whether he was praising or criticizing him and added that a couple more artifacts needed to be made. At that moment a soldier passed by. He noticed that the main character was using magic. The soldier asked him what he was doing. The man asked what this device was and where he got it. The guy replied that he wanted to give the king a gift to apologize and asked for help to deliver it. The soldier wondered how he opened the door. Vaken sneered, saying that the lock was primitive and even any monkey could open it. He poured liquid metal into it and the lock cracked. Then he asked the soldier if he would take him to the king. The man raised his weapon and angrily said that it was his business to stop him. The main character replied that he thought so. At that moment Bacon threw one of his artifacts directly at the soldier's body, then activated it. At first the man did not understand what was happening. Some incomprehensible substance appeared on his gear and then the armor began to rust. In a few seconds the man's body seemed naked. He looked at it in surprise and asked what it was. The protagonist did not even move. He turned to Zosmos and stated that with this they would easily reach the king. The assistant asked if he really got this artifact because of that. This thing was called slime preparation number 18. 500 years ago it was insanely popular. As soon as you throw it off, the slime instantly begins to multiply. It melts only the outer clothing, leaving the target bare, and also stimulates certain points. With its help they caused mischief, and very quickly we had to somehow curb its use. At that moment the soldier who was attacked asked again what it was, and then asked to have it taken off him. To this the main character turned to him and said, "I won't die from this, so don't worry, I'll just be left without clothes and armor." Zosimos then said that if they had artificial fairies they would easily free them, but they do not have any. Vaken said that they just need to keep going. The main hero was walking through the castle corridors when he came across a squad of soldiers. They said they had finally found him and now needed to call for reinforcements. Soon Vekona was surrounded by soldiers. They formed a rather tight circle and aimed their weapons at him, and the boy was a little surprised. Zosimos asked him what they would do fight. He replied that there was no need for that. He had created a bunch of slime in reserve because he was sure he would not go unnoticed. The main character stood calmly, and at that moment several soldiers decided to attack him. Then he took out several vials of slime agent number 18 and threw them at the soldiers. At first, the soldiers seemed to ignore it, but when Vacant activated the elixirs, they enveloped the men's armor and the soldiers were surprised. Gradually, the armor and other clothing began to dissolve. They asked what it was. The men continued to groan and make some incomprehensible sounds. Finally, they noticed that the slime was dissolving their clothes and asked about it aloud. Strange sounds were still coming from the castle corridor, but no one even reacted. Soon all the men were lying prostrate at his feet, and he barely glanced at them. Suddenly, Bacon scratched his cheek, got nervous, and said that this somehow looked not very good. The assistant agreed with him. After that, the main character turned away and said he did not want to look at wet men. Zosimos said he was convinced again he had no heart. The boy added that this was the best of the illegal artifacts. The assistant said that in that case he could simply use an artifact that changes appearance, to which Viking admitted he had not thought of that. At that moment the girl attacked him. He barely managed to avoid the attack. The stranger tried to hit him several times, but Ui skillfully dodged the attacks each time after that he fell to the floor. The main character thought that she was very fast, completely unlike the other guards. He felt that someone truly strong was in front of him. The girl said she had found him, calling him by name. The stranger held a sword in her hands. She said she had received an order to execute him, so he needed to prepare. The main character raised his hands in front of him, hesitated, and whispered that he had not hurt anyone yet. The girl did not react to this at all. She only slightly changed her pose and told him to prepare for death. It turned out her name was Princess Guardian Maya Fonte, and Vacant tried to explain himself, asking to be heard, saying he just wanted to talk to the king. But she did not let him finish his speech immediately. Enraged, she lunged at him, and he managed to dodge the attack at the last moment. The girl sharply declared that she would not allow him to see the king, and Bacon, trying to justify himself, explained that he had medicine for that man. Then Maya blurted out whether he really wanted to poison him, calling him a villain. The main character dodged another blow. Landing on bent legs, he resolutely said that she is one of those who do not obey. Bacon tried to argue and explain that he just wanted the king to enjoy life, and she replied that he was clearly dealing in prohibited substances, and he, shocked, asked again. Maya Fanti said that he dodges her attacks, so he is clearly not an ordinary person, and he just shrugged in response, "I am just an ordinary alchemist." Zosimos asked if it was worth using the artifacts, to which he replied that for now he could manage without them. The assistant asked why he acted that way, since the girl was fighting seriously, and Vacant agreed but hesitated with his answer. The main character began to say that if he fought seriously, she would be offended, and after defeat, she would hardly recover so easily. He also added that he did not want to resort to force because how else would he make an impression on the king? Maya was clearly dissatisfied. The main heroine stubbornly repeated that she was a girl and the weaker sex is not treated that way. The girl almost ground her teeth in anger. Her anger grew to the limit. She shouted at him that he was a bad person and immediately asked, "Did you underestimate me?" The main heroine froze in shock. She really heard him. Maya shouted that she would execute him and cut off his head. The boy thought that now she definitely would not listen to him. At that moment, Maya rushed at him and hit very hard. He was a bit tired but in normal condition, and Maya, looking at him, thought that she had hit him with all her might and he was still alive. Zosimos said that he had to use a weapon, to which he replied that it was okay, he was defending himself, not attacking, and the assistant noted that it was a strange rule. Zosimos said that he really needed to defend himself, so maybe it was time to give in and use the rest of the artifacts, but that man replied that he would like to avoid further fighting, and Zosimos thought that this could be used. In his head, he was already imagining how the potion would affect Maya, and his cheeks blushed a little. Just at that moment, the assistant called him and said that he was probably thinking about something bad, to which he sharply replied to be quiet because there was nothing bad about it. While he was talking with Zosimos, the girl attacked him again. She shouted that you cannot be distracted in battle, and he broke free from the attack literally at the last moment. At some point, she managed to knock him off his feet. He fell. She said that he was caught. When he was falling, he threw a vial of elixir towards her. She cut it in the air, but it still hit the target. After a few moments, her armor along with her clothes began to dissolve. She was shocked and asked, "What is this?" The The main hero swore a little when he saw the scene that appeared before him. Zosimo said that of course this was not what he wanted, and he said this with obvious sarcasm. Maya Fanti was still fighting with everything around. She had almost no clothes left, but she said it was rather lustful and then asked if he really thought he could defeat her that way. The main hero said he did not intend to defeat her. She herself broke the test tube, told him to shut up, and lunged at him. Suddenly she felt something. Wacken told her that she better not twitch too much. She again asked him to shut up and added that it would not stop her. But with every step she felt worse. The guy said it was because she was moving so much, and if she calmed down she would feel better just like the other guards. Maya Fanti said she now understood where all the guards had gone and asked not to underestimate her, because she was the princess's guard. The girl tried various techniques and firmly declared, no matter what happens she will protect the king's life. But even her strength was exhausted. Zosima said it was strange few can withstand the slime, and the main heroine agreed, she was indeed a strong girl. At that moment Bacon said that even someone like her has a limit, and approached her. Then he lightly poked her forehead. She opened her eyes wide. All this happened because the slime increased her sensitivity. The main heroine said that no matter how much she restrained herself, her body was now very sensitive to any external influences. Zosimo told him that he was a real devil, to which the guy replied that he might look at her a little more. The assistant was silent for a moment, then asked if he really should tell Fio about this. The main hero immediately remembered the girl and froze. After this, Bacon sharply told him that he must leave here. Zosimo coldly replied that his vocabulary has over 60 words that can now describe him. The boy asked not to say anything. After some time they left the castle. The main character, surprisingly, said they got out quite easily, and the assistant replied that if the castle had been ready for the villains' attacks, it would have held. Zosimo said that both the captain of the royal guard and even the prime minister are still writhing with pleasure. At this moment the hero whispered that at least he managed to give the king the elixir and already deactivate the activation code of the mucus drug, so it can be considered that everything is fine. After that, Bacon said it was time to return to Fiathi. Were already late, and the assistant smiled and replied that he always knew how to dodge responsibility. After some time they reached the Tuesday Hotel. Fio smiled at them and greeted them. She asked how everything went. The main character smiled gently at her and said that of course everything went completely smoothly. The girl asked how it was for him in the castle, and he gave himself up to thoughts, recalling all the events that had happened. After that, the boy snapped out of his thoughts, nervously scratched his face and said he was nervous, so he didn't remember everything very well. The main heroine thought that the king looked too much like a king. She laughed and asked what was strange about that. Bacon changed the subject and suggested instead to go shopping, then apologized for making her wait. She suggested he rest a bit because he looked tired. The main character smiled warmly at her and said that everything was fine if he was nearby. The fatigue would simply disappear and the girl became shy again. Her face flashed red, she even trembled. Vacant did not understand what was happening, and at that moment Zosimo said that it was good. After this, they finally went outside. Theo asked if they should go to a restaurant, to which he replied that it was his personal idea, so they had to go. It blossomed on her face. The girl said that they should go to a seafood and vegetable restaurant, Bistro Akshai. Bacon said that sounded wonderful, and then they held hands. The main character blushed at this gesture. Theo laughed. He asked her what she was doing, and she said that it was strange to her that she was the one who shouted at him during their first meeting. Wacken agreed with her and added that she also hit him. Memories of their first meeting flooded him. The main character said that although it was not long ago, it seemed as if they had known each other for an eternity. He chuckled. The girl closed her eyes and agreed, saying she felt the same. Later they returned to the hotel. It was evening, and the main character sat in the room, intently looking at the diagram. Zosimo teased that writing on paper is very old-fashioned and asked Wacken if he had forgotten about his artificial fairy. Wacken replied that it was easier to make her if you draw on paper. The main character said that he was creating an artificial fairy named Alina for Fio. A happy smile shone on his face. The artifacts support an artificial fairy, a tool that truly makes people's lives much better. But Zosima, created by Wacken, had a completely different purpose. She had her own artificial mind. Other artificial fairies, if needed, can also feel, think, and speak. Zosima listened to his speech and said that he understood everything. She was his younger sister. Then the main character asked him if that made him happy. His assistant said that it was quite a complicated question. He asked him what to call this mixture of anxiety and excitement. The main character pondered his question and after a moment guessed that maybe this is called excitement. Then Zosimo said that he understood everything, but it seemed to him that he was simply happy. For this he needed advanced alchemical equipment, to which Vakken replied that as long as the Towers of the Wise stand, the equipment exists. Phil approached the main character, placed her hands on his shoulders, and asked what he was doing. The boy gently took her by the wrist and pulled her close. He told her it was a secret, he did not want to spoil the surprise. The girl replied that it was no longer a surprise. Vakken responded that it would still remain a surprise because she would wait with great interest. A new day came, the sun shone brightly outside the window, and pleasant sounds came from one of the hotel rooms. The main character woke up, scratched his head, and asked with surprise who was knocking on the door, and he was told that it was the hotel owner Chu S1. Vakken opened the door for the man. He said that someone had asked to see him, then asked if he had a minute, to which Vakken inquired who it could be. The man said that the visitor was a girl from the Imperial Guard. Her name was Maya Fanti. Vakken became upset when he heard this. After some time, the main character approached her with an awkward smile, called her by name, and asked if she really needed something. When he spoke, the girl grimaced so unfriendly that it was clear she did not want to see him at all, and even called him by name. The main character smiled broadly at her and said that the motto of alchemists is "Let's make the world better," then added that he was one of the alchemists and introduced himself as Vacant Ord. Maya looked at him in shock. Extreme fatigue from the whole situation was visible on her face. The boy laughed. Zosimo said that he reminded him of a pseudo-religious guru. The girl simply gave up. She sighed heavily and said that the king was calling him again. He froze at these words. The main character said that he had to refuse, he was leaving tomorrow morning, to which Maya indignantly blurted out that it was a summons from the king himself. Then Vakken said that it was time to return. He had nothing more to do here, to which the girl again replied that it was a summons from the king. The main character thought to himself that she clearly was not going to listen to him. Aloud he said that he was generally reckless. What if she said something else, and he would be put in prison again? The girl immediately remembered how he had treated her, and her cheeks flushed. She said that she also did not want to come here, but had to bring him to the castle. Maya Fanti said that thanks to the potion the main character had prepared for the king, he decided to cover up what he had done in the castle. Vakken said that no formalities were needed for the potion. If you really want, just say thank you. The girl shook her head and said no, adding that he should come to the castle tomorrow morning. The main character considered all this tyranny, hated the people in power, and said aloud that he would come. Maya Fanti turned to leave the room. Arna said that they were waiting for him tomorrow, that he should come. The main character thought that he had caused them so many problems, and now they were calling him there again. The assistant said that he understood his feelings. Akanya made a funny grimace and said that next time he escaped from prison, he would not hold back. Here an interesting thought flashed through the main character's mind. He asked if they were all strange there, and he was affected by how he treated them. Bacon smiled slyly and said that this was great news. This time, he would prepare 3,000 in advance. After that, his face turned red. He even stuck out his tongue in anticipation and said that Maya Fanti would get the worst of it. Zosim said that saliva was dripping from his mouth. He was clearly a bad person, to which the boy asked in surprise if that was true. At that moment, the main character saw how Maya Fanti suddenly dropped to her knees, her body trembling. She turned to him with tears in her eyes and said she would kill him, and he muttered a curse under his breath. A new day came. The main character, as promised, came to the royal castle, and there were many people gathered again. Bacon and the king looked at each other, neither said a word, and the rest were silent as well. After that, the king said, "First of all, you must know we will not ask you questions about your behavior yesterday." The boy was surprised. Then the main character sincerely thanked him for his understanding. The man in glasses said that they needed to talk about the potion, thanks, and the reward in an envelope. The king joined the conversation and said that now they wanted to talk about the future. The main character froze in surprise. The man said that after the previous incident they knew he was a talented alchemist. If he had been an agent of another country, their country would have been destroyed that day. The main character thought that he had never thought about that at all, and said aloud that such a possibility was also possible. The man in glasses noticed this, emphasized the words, and said that they had taken it into account. Then he pointed at Wacken with his fingers and said that they had decided to invite him to work in the castle. The main character immediately asked him. The man in glasses announced that from now on behalf of His Majesty the King, he would oversee the development of alchemy in their country, and everyone present immediately burst into joyful applause. The main character asked what should he do if he does not want to. Everyone around froze with open mouths. At that moment, the guards surrounded him again, holding spears in front of them ready to attack at any moment, and called him by name again. The man in glasses warned that the main character was incredibly strong and extremely dangerous. They could not allow him to fall into foreign hands. The man added that this was exactly why they had to do everything correctly. Then Bacon asked if they really thought he could be controlled, and he himself was quite surprised. The main character said that someone really needed his alchemy and bitterly added, if he had not broken out of prison, he would have been noticed. To this, the man in glasses replied that this was precisely why they wanted to pay attention to alchemy. They sought to create a state body governed by law. The hero whispered that they should not lie. In this country, there are no laws at all that control alchemy and alchemists. There are not even laws about the sale and distribution of potions made by oneself. The man, who was clearly nervous, said that this was because they had no expert. Then Bacon added that they very much wanted him to create the law he deemed necessary. After that, the main character said that they would not be able to talk, and although he treated them with respect, he refused to take part in this. At that moment, one of the king's close aides ran up from the side, pressed a spear to him, and asked if he really understood nothing. The soldier kept repeating that he could not ignore his majestic king. Then he asked Wacken if he should behead him right here and now, no matter how powerful his artifacts were. There were many of them, and they would manage. The main character decisively said that with such a number of people he could not be stopped, and the soldier was completely bewildered by these words. After this, Wacken addressed His Majesty directly and asked whether this soldier acted on his orders. The king was even surprised by such a question. Then the king noticeably became nervous. He turned to the main hero and told him to wait. His soldier simply had a fiery temper. The soldier waved off these words, declared that he would no longer tolerate it. This man is dangerous for the kingdom, so this evil must be eradicated. The main character warned him, if he does not obey and wants to kill him, he will be forced to consider him a villain. Wacken added that the soldier was clearly much angrier than him, and that soldier really got angry because of his words. That man instantly told the protagonist that he was a bad person, after which he swung a weapon at him. At that moment, the protagonist activated his ability again. And then slime appeared on the body of this soldier, which began to corrode his clothes and armor. The man did not understand at all what it was and what was happening in general. The main character explained that this potion made from slime number 18 is nothing to worry about. The soldier will just be unable to move for some time, but he probably knew that himself. The soldiers watching this froze in shock. One of them shouted angrily that he had started doing it again. At the same time, the clothing on the body of the first soldier had almost completely disappeared, and he could only make strange sounds that clearly confused the other guards. The main character rose from his knees, closed his eyes, and said in a calm voice that they were no different from bandits. Everything is decided by bad deeds. After that, Wacken turned around and said that their conversation was over. He was leaving. The king tried to stop him, calling him by name. The hero did not even turn at the sound of his voice. He only told the man to control the people around him. He also said that alchemy leads people to a happy future. It should not be used for personal gain. The king was embarrassed by his words, but it felt like he understood something for himself. Zosimo's asked if the medicine could be taken off the commander of the guard Gertie, to which Wacken said, "Let him rest a little longer, he definitely will not die." A week later, they returned home and immediately headed to the tavern Dancing Duck. Fio smiled and told her father that they were home. The man immediately approached them, smiled broadly, and asked how their trip went. Fio said it was very fun and they bought a bunch of souvenirs. The man asked to see them, and at that moment Wacken asked how he managed here without his daughter. He replied that Chaina helped him. The latter greeted him. It was the same girl who was locked in the mirror dimension. The main character instantly recalled scenes from the past when he saved her, and aloud with relief said he was glad her health was fine. The girl smiled and thanked him, then added that she was completely healthy now. Bacon said he was happy for her. Phil sincerely thanked the girl for helping her father, and Chaina said there was no need to thank and that they better rest because they had just arrived. Fio said that she definitely would not refuse such an offer, after which she took the main character by the hand and added that they would go upstairs to have some tea. Bacon and the girl suddenly understood something while the father looked at them in surprise and asked, "What happened? Have they really become so close, and when did they even manage to do that?" To this, Fio cautiously turned around and said that it was definitely just a hallucination. T backed them up and added that it was quite logical they had just returned from a trip. The man agreed with her and sighed emptily. He immediately jumped up to the main character and promised that when they drink together, he would definitely tell him everything. The boy froze in shock. The main character blushed. He tensed up because of the whole situation, and the only way out for him was simply to agree. After some time, Bacon and the man found themselves in a bar. Glasses with drinks stood before them, and while his father was talking to him, the man thought that tomorrow morning he would feel bad again. The next morning, the hero felt tired and hungover. He sat holding his head. His face was pale. The artificial village reminded him that the host had drunk 3 times more than allowed. The young man replied that he remembered. However, he did not regret it at all. The night of drinking with Edgar was worth it. Finally, they were able to have a good time together. The system commented that it would never understand when a person puts instant pleasure above health. Ken pointed to the boxes with bottles and said that he managed not only to have fun but also to work. He made several boxes of that potion. The fairy reproachfully noted that even tipsy, this alchemist knows how to create magical drinks, and the hero added that they worked a little in the workshop, and soon he would be able to prepare even more. Suddenly Maya appeared before him. She approached the boy with a request. The young man understood what exactly the princess wanted from him, who knelt before him on one knee. He asked what she was doing in such a remote place. Ken noticed how the royal person knelt down and realized that is how one bows, and what he did earlier was a mistake. The girl solemnly addressed the horde. Maya said in a firm voice that by the order of His Majesty she would serve the hero. The young man knew nothing about the king's decision and hastily objected that he had not been informed. The girl pulled out a letter, and the young man quickly unfolded it. He read that the king wanted to apologize for his audacious ignorance, so to show sincerity, he decided to send his daughter to Ken. His Majesty wrote that Maya was an excellent knight. Moreover, she was educated and could be useful to him. Jean hoped that Ken would eventually be able to love Juri, and the letter ended there. After reading, the young man had no other choice and had to ask the princess to return home. Maya was outraged. The boy explained that he did not want to have anything to do with the royal family, and the girl said she could not return to the castle. She honestly admitted that she was sent to seduce the hero in order to recruit him. The boy smiled and said that she did not always have to be so honest, and when he began to leave, the girl rushed to stop him. She said that Ken could not just leave her like that. The princess reminded him of the dirt he had caused her, because now no one would want to marry her. The young man suddenly remembered how he threw slime on Maya that wrapped around her body and prevented her from moving. He apologized for this and recalled that the king called that girl his daughter. The boy asked if Maya was really from the royal family. The girl explained that she was the child of a concubine, so many in the palace did not accept her. She added that that was exactly why they decided to send her as a sacrifice. Ken asked not to call the plan to seduce him a ritual murder. He said he had already decided. The young man accepted the apology and was even ready to help if needed, but he did not need an assistant. He asked the girl to return home, but Maya was not going to back down. She suddenly approached the hero and asked how many more times she would have to repeat that she was not returning. Ken could not answer under such unexpected pressure. The girl trembled and began to mutter something uncertainly. She ran her hands over her body and said that the boy could punish her if she was a naughty girl, and the young man realized what she wanted and shuddered with horror. Maya asked him not to think badly of her and not to call her names, but then she changed her mind and asked him to scold her more, and Ken shouted that he did not want to do that at all. He could not understand how everything could have happened like that. The artificial fairy explained that it all happened because the gentleman used drug number 8, which awakened a new fetish in Maya. Ken turned to the princess, asked her to calm down, and reminded her that she was from the royal family. It was unbecoming for her to behave like that, otherwise she would be condemned. The girl refused to listen to him and declared that social norms were already dead for her. Nothing restrained her anymore, and the young man was in shock and did not know what to do with the princess. Hearing the noise, Fio came out to the boys and asked Ken if they had a client. The young man replied that it was their usual weirdo, and the girl did not understand why he said that. The princess smiled kindly at the tavern owner's daughter and introduced herself. I am Maya von Juri, the new assistant of Pleasures of Vacanta. Bill was confused, and the hero advised her not to take that girl seriously, because her very appearance only brought misunderstandings. Maya looked around and asked if this was their workshop and if there was a tavern here. Fio confirmed, and the princess inquired if they could prepare a room for her. The owner's daughter gladly agreed. Maya said she would stay for a long time and handed over a whole bag of money. Fio's eyes instantly lit up. The girl took the payment and immediately rushed to prepare everything. The princess, pleased that now she and the hero would live together, slyly smiled at Ken. Meanwhile, Ord was thinking about how to get rid of her. Since the princess moved into the dancing duck, 10 days had passed. Together with Ken, they worked in the garden, picking apples. The boy asked the girl when she was going to return home. Maya replied that she was not going anywhere. She reminded him that she was not useless at all after all. She helped collect alchemical materials, and he sighed wearily because he realized that the girl was serious about being his guardian, and this made him uneasy. Bacon turned to the princess and reminded her that he already had a beloved Fio, and the girl dropped to one knee and replied that she knew. Maya, with a sparkle in her eyes, resolutely said that she would not become his beloved. She wanted to be his servant and an instrument of pleasure. The boy shuddered when he saw that look again. That look seemed to be waiting for punishment. He said he would never understand her. The girl still looked at him with a mournful gaze. The boy advised her to return to the capital, but the princess shouted loudly that she would not return and demanded that the hero continue to insult her, while Ken was already tired of her and sighed heavily. Maya noticed that lately Mr. Vakin had been doing nothing but gathering herbs and fulfilling orders for healing potions. She asked if he was not going to hunt monsters and conquer the labyrinth. She thought she would be much more useful if he gave her a chance to show how she wielded a sword. The hero thoughtfully examined the fruit in his hand. He sighed and replied that because of her he could not do that. Ken asked her what would happen if she, as a princess, got injured while being near him. At such caring words, Maya's body weakened, her face flushed, words stuck in her throat, and she quietly muttered that the gentleman had suddenly become so kind, while the hero, on the contrary, was irritated by this reaction. But Ken really wanted to do something. He thought about going into the labyrinth. The girl immediately lit up. She resolutely said she would go there with the hero, but he categorically objected. The princess asked why he would not allow her, and the young man replied that he would go there on a mission from the guild to which he belonged. Maya's bed was not part of the guild, so Ken could not take her with him. He begged her obediently to stay at home. The artificial fairy enthusiastically praised the gentleman. Zissimos thought the princess would definitely back down. The boy thought so too, that way he could calmly enter the labyrinth alone. Suddenly Maya handed him a folded sheet of paper. He unfolded it and asked what it was, and the girl replied that she was ready for it. The boy read and realized that the princess had already been registered in the guild, and she was even in the same group with Ken, so he instantly broke out in a cold sweat. The girl smiled and said that their team was called Snail Lovers Club. The hero shouted that it was too strange a name and asked when it was even possible to drag a person into a group without their permission. The princess whispered that these were the ghosts of the royal family. The young man, without hesitation, declared that the guild was ruled by monkeys. The boy was not ready to accept this. Seeing how upset the master was, Maya asked with an expectant look if he would punish her. Ken trembled with helplessness because he could do nothing with the princess. The fairy said that this time the young man had completely lost. Suddenly, the system announced a fight on the Western Trail. The hero ordered Zissimos to observe the situation. The fairy said that there was one man and a powerful monster there. The young man could not understand how such a creature could be in a place where there were usually almost no monsters, and it was relatively safe. The hero activated his powers and said that they were heading their way. Ken handed Maya a bottle and told her to drink. Maya asked what it was, and the alchemist replied that it was a speed elixir that allows running about 10 meters in 10 seconds. The young man gave the princess one bottle and took another for himself. Before drinking, he said that the goal of alchemy was to help people, and Ken advised them to hurry. He ordered Zissimos to lead them by the shortest path. The artificial system plotted the route and told the boys to move forward. Soon they came across a huge monster looming over a wounded boy and firmly holding the elbow of his severed arm. The hero saw such a creature for the first time and immediately guessed whose new breed it was. He ordered the fairy to find any information about the enemy. The princess screamed, begging the boy to be more careful and vigilant. Ken shouted to the girl, "Protect the victim." The girl instantly rushed to the boy. The boy was about to deal with the monster. He drew circles around himself from which magical swords emerged. They rushed straight at the monster, but it was indifferent to the attacks. The swords exploded upon touching its body, but it remained alive, and the young man did not understand why he could not wound the monster. The fairy said that she was still checking information about the creature in the archives, then added that this monster is called the Beast of Hatred. Mentions of it were found in records from 500 years ago, and the hero's attacks only enraged and provoked the monster. They rushed to strike the hero, but he managed to dodge and the blow hit the ground. Ken roared that it was impossible for him not to know about this monster. After all, he had studied the entire archive. The creature continued to attack from all sides. The boy noticed that if it were not for the speed potion he drank, he would already be dead. Ken needed something more powerful. He was going to attack the enemy until he found its weak spot. The young man created magical blades of all elements which swirled in the air around him. The young man threw discs at the monster, which fiercely defended itself. With long and strong arms, the monster broke the hero's blades, but the young man did not stop throwing them. The monster did not give up. While it was distracted, the boy pulled out the alchemist's staff, jumped, and swung. He wanted to destroy the enemy with one blow. Ken hit the monster and cut it in half. Although the boy won, he knew he needed to study this type of monster. Suddenly, Maya's alarmed voice distracted him. The young man approached her. The girl was sitting next to the boy's body. The princess said with a quiet reproach that they were late. The boy did not move and his eyes were closed. Ken sat down next to the body and advised the girl not to look away from him. He said that now he would show her what true alchemy of the future could lead to a magical disc that formed in the hero's hands. Various artifacts appeared around the alchemist. A large bowl grew before him, into which he threw magical items. Then the artifacts seemed to dissolve in the bowl and the hero saved them. He attached the magical items to the disc he held in his hand. A stone appeared from it and the young man pulled it out. Ken raised his hands up. His power and the artifacts merged into one and the hero enclosed them in a small sphere. Without touching the stone, the boy magically squeezed a drop from it and it fell right on his head. Then light shone around him and the boy came to life, opened his eyes and looked around in surprise. Maya and Ken rejoiced, learning that he was all right. After some time, the heroes were riding through the forest. The princess was impressed and fascinated by Mr. Wacken's alchemy, and the young man thanked her and said that now she could return home and tell the king about the possibilities of magic. Maya confidently said she would stay by his side. She wanted him to help people. The boy was not particularly pleased by this and had an idea. The alchemist suggested that the knight explain exactly what he had just done, and the girl did not object. And immediately a continuous stream of information poured onto Maya. The hero told that he used the potion La Messia, explained in detail what it was and how he mastered this skill, and even mentioned the conceptual third-generation device Nebril. The girl's eyes widened from the excess of new information. When the boy finished and asked if she understood everything, Maya could not answer anything. She was simply exhausted. Zosimo's remarked that the gentleman was pure evil. The young man smiled slyly and thought that it was not yet at the level of knight, but when he spent time with Maya, he realized. Although she was from the royal family, she worked for the people, and he sincerely considered her a good person. He understood that His Majesty had his own goals and views which the hero might not comprehend or accept, but Ken believed that thanks to Maya, His Majesty decided to give this country a chance, and the fairy noticed that the gentleman had grown wiser in his judgments. When the knight and the alchemist returned to the tavern, the night fell. On the table before Ken lay the defeated monster. The hero could not understand what kind of creature it was. There were no internal organs, metabolism was incomplete, and the skin was like nettle. The young man looked into the monster's mouth and immediately recognized a predator in it, but there was no tongue. The fangs were real weapons. At first glance, the skeleton seemed human, but the tail and legs revealed an animal. Ken realized that this was not a creature of nature. He asked Zosimo to find more information about this monster. The fairy fulfilled the request, but no matter how much she searched, the result was the same. Screens with various documents and articles hovered before him, and Zosimo looked closely at the message from the sage of the Modus dynasty. It was vague but accurate. The hero read it and asked the fairy what she thought about it. Everything he saw and read seemed strange to him. Ken noticed that since the first appearance of the monster, there was no more information about it. He understood that the monster could have been the cause of the fall of the Modus dynasty. The fairy reminded him that this was only a hypothesis. They needed to learn more about the monster's history. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The princess approached him. The girl said that she had already informed the palace about the monster and found out that they had some records about it. This was exactly what the hero needed. He asked for permission to look at them. Maya said it would be difficult. The records were a royal secret. The young man ordered Zosimo to find out where the royal archive was and how to get there. The fairy said she would find the castle's layout in the database, and Maya hesitated for a moment but still decided to find out something from the master. She asked who this Bacon really was. The boy did not expect such a question. He was confused and answered that he was an alchemist. The girl expected such an answer from the hero and said directly that it did not satisfy her. The young man noticed how Maya looked at him. The gaze was full of doubt and anxiety, and he was not sure if he could deceive her. The princess begged him to understand her correctly and added that under no circumstances would her loyalty to him change, and Ken casually clarified whether she was refusing his advances. The hero apologized for asking again and asked why she needed to know so much. Maya was embarrassed. She wanted to know everything about the man she loved, and it seemed quite natural to her. The alchemist did not expect the night to open up. He glanced at the fairy and quietly whispered what to do. Zosimos said that the gentleman behaved pitifully. Suddenly, Maya turned to the magical creature. The girl asked in surprise why she looked like that and what artificial fairy meant, and Zosim replied that she was an assistant of vacant, a kind of artifact, and the young man noted to himself that the fairy acted very cunningly and cleverly. Maya reluctantly admitted that she had suspected this. When it was time for the hero to confess, he, sensing this, denied it and said that he had not really told his beloved anything about himself, which made the girl smile with interest and satisfaction. Suddenly, the knight approached the young man and said that, having learned his secret, she would be one step ahead as his wife. The boy immediately began to object. He did not understand what was happening and asked if Maya wanted to make him punish her in this way. The princess said that when her father treated her mother so cruelly, she thought she would never love a man, but as soon as she met the gentleman, love immediately overwhelmed her. Finally, the girl sighed and asked for forgiveness. She said everything she wanted and was about to leave. Before leaving, Maya asked him to forget everything. She admitted that she just wanted to be honest with the one she loved and nothing more. This honesty and sincerity made the hero change his mind. He stopped the princess. Ken said that he could not go into details but admitted he was truly reincarnated. The princess looked at the young man in surprise. The hero's gaze became both serious and sad. Ken said that he was a man from the times of a modest dynasty and an alchemist who lived 500 years ago. Meanwhile, Teresk sat on the cold mountain. The resentment towards Ken boiled inside him, but despite this, he acknowledged the hero's truth. Teresk agreed that alchemists strive to create a bright future, but he wanted the young man to remember something. The boy's face twisted with anger and arrogance. His eyes darkened. He was about to remind Vacan of all his sins. When Maya learned the truth that the gentleman was reincarnated, she again asked in surprise, and the young man confirmed. Due to certain circumstances, he had slept for 500 years, and although he looked young, he was actually 40. The girl agreed, noting that Ken was quite calm for his age. Now the princess knew who he really was, and the boy asked if she felt better. The fairy flew up to her master. She asked if the gentleman was sure about what he was doing. He did not understand what Zosmos was talking about because she did not stop him. Maya, understanding everything, smiled. He was glad that Ken opened up to her and thanked him. The young man nodded and suddenly realized that maybe he just needed someone to listen to him. The alchemist, looking into the night, admitted that he also felt better and sincerely thanked him. At that moment, Maya's true nature broke the tense silence and burst out. She asked if now this secret was between the two of them, and Ken, hesitating, replied that she must keep it. Looking at the princess, the boy asked where her seriousness had gone. The girl insisted on something else. She asked if he could date someone since he was actually 40 years old. The young man corrected her a little. In his previous life, he was not yet 40, so now he was somewhere in his 30s. At this news, Maya had a nosebleed. The boy did not understand why the girl reacted that way and then called her behavior unacceptable. The knight seemed to ask to be scolded even more harshly. A few days later, when everyone was ready, Ken suddenly said he wanted to go to his hometown, and this surprised everyone. The hero explained that he planned to work outside the village, so he decided to visit the city at the same time. Theo and Maya ran up to the young man and exclaimed with burning eyes that they would go with him. The boy tried to convince them, warning that the road would be long and dangerous. The artificial ferryman sided with the master and added that monsters would meet them on the way. Theo confessed that she wanted to see the place where her beloved lived. Ken understood her feelings and pondered. The boy knew that Maya could stand up for herself, but he was not sure about Theo. Suddenly, Zosim outran the master and agreed to take the girl on the journey. Ken did not expect this. Theo was happy and hugged the fairy, and the hero muttered mentally that Zosim should help him, not take away the love of his girl. The boy was forced to ask Edgar for help. The man laughed out loud and said that the boy was already old enough to want to return home. He asked Ken to take the girls with him. Edgar asked to send his greetings to his parents. The boy froze at these words. The hero could not tell them the truth. His parents had long since died, but for Theo it was a great opportunity to see Midas. The young man wanted his beloved to have a chance to know the real him. Watching the girl play with the artificial fairy, Ken barely restrained his doubts. Would Theo accept him upon learning the truth, since modern people might perceive him as a living dead man? Maya told Via that first thing tomorrow morning they would go to the market and prepare for the journey. The girl was delighted with this plan. The hero looked thoughtfully at the knight and thought that perhaps with the princess's help they could have a good time. Maya noticed how the gentleman was looking at her and her cheeks flushed with a blush. She was jumping for joy. Ken finally smiled and agreed to take the girls with him. Theo confessed that she was curious what her beloved's hometown would be like. Their journey lasted 3 days, and when the heroes finally reached the place, the artificial fairy announced that they were there. But only a wasteland stretched before them. The girls did not understand anything. Maya asked Zosimo's if she was sure they were in the right place, and the fairy replied that the city was underground. Zosimo's flared up. The ground trembled under the heroes' feet. The fairy opened access to the emergency exit. When the extra stones and structures collapsed, the boys saw a single stone entrance before them. Inside, spiral stairs awaited them, leading down. The young man went down first and the girls followed. The fairy apologized, saying they wanted to make an elevator, but nothing worked out, to which the hero replied that this was better than Rex. Zosimo's agreed with the host and reported that so far no problems with ventilation or lighting had been detected. Theo asked her beloved where they were heading. The hero explained that they were going to the ruins of the city of Modus, and the girl asked in surprise, "Isn't it his hometown?" The young man replied that it would take a long time to explain, and added that Modus was undoubtedly his hometown. Candles lit up in the corridor, their light driving away the boys and revealing a view of the ruined city. Ken greeted the girls in the city of Modus. Maya said that the view of the city, as if painted with gold and silver, simply took her breath away, and the boy noted that it was no longer so majestic. Much had collapsed. Theo smiled at Modus. She admitted that she considered this city unreal and fairy tale-like. The young man heard this. He approached her and asked again. The girl told that their people have a famous fairy tale, the Golden City of Modus. Ken inquired about it from the fairy, but she knew nothing. Zosimo's asked Theo to tell them that story. The artificial fairy was going to record the narrator's voice and put it in the archive. The girl admitted that she would feel embarrassed, but Zosimo's explained that this recording would be played every evening like a bedtime story, and Theo did not mind. She began to tell. Once Dill was a young man in a village and his younger sister was very ill. He worked every day to buy medicine, but the sister got worse and worse. The boy decided to take her to the Golden City of Modus, to the wizards, about whom a traveler once told him. He knew that in exchange for help they would ask for treasures and obedience. No alchemist wanted to help the young man. All refused because he brought too little money and treasures, and the wizards, although living among countless riches, still craved even more gold and silver. The boy was confused and did not know what to do. The young man found himself on the street with his sick sister in his arms, and when he despaired, someone noticed him. Having listened to the youth to the end, he only smiled. His face was kinder than any wizard in the city. He extended his hand and said that the boy was lucky to meet him. As soon as the alchemist said this, he immediately waved his wand and cast a spell on the poor girl. Her body shone. Immediately she felt completely healthy. The girl could jump and run again, and she felt much better. Then the youth sincerely thanked the wizard and asked why he was so kind to them. Before answering, he threw back the hood of his cloak. The alchemist smiled and said that for him the most important thing is always to be kind to people. Then he turned into the wind and disappeared, and the sister and brother, full of gratitude, decided to live by his life principle. When Phil finished the story, everything suddenly became clear, both for the fairy and for the hero. The girl added at the end that it was a well-known fairy tale, known to everyone in the Jewish community, and was surprised that Ken did not know it, to which he hesitantly agreed. Suddenly Zosimo's blurted out that the wizard from that story was a master. Theo did not understand what he meant and asked how Ken could be connected to that story. The artificial fairy realized that the boy was a sorcerer and said that in this distorted city of gold and silver, greed reigns and good people are rare. The young man approached his beloved and apologized for not telling her anything. Theo still did not understand what he was talking about. The boy confessed that he was a man who lived 500 years ago. Seeing the question in the girl's eyes, Ken explained that he was born a very long time ago. For the young Theo, this was unexpected, but on the contrary, she beamed. She was stunned now. She understood why her beloved knew so much. Noticing that Maya was not surprised, the girl asked if the princess already knew about this secret. She proudly said that she had found out about it before Theo. The girl pouted and admitted that she was jealous, then asked if the princess and Ken had been close recently, and the boy replied that although it sounded incredible, he was on Fio's side. The hero asked his beloved if the news about him had not pushed her away after all. He was 500 years older than her. Fio smiled gently and replied that she did not care because her lineage always remains the same. She came closer and pressed her forehead to the young man's forehead. The girl admitted that she was surprised to learn that her boyfriend turned out to be a wizard from a fairy tale, but it was precisely because of this that she loved the story even more. Maya looked at the couple with a smile, and it seemed that she was waiting for something. The artificial fairy drew the gentleman's attention to this. She asked if he would embrace her too. The young man replied that there was no need for that. He explained what the girl was experiencing. She felt like a miserable knight who was neglected, and she liked it. The boy advised Zosimo's to look at the princess's face, who was restraining herself before Fio as much as she could. The fairy sighed heavily and agreed that Maya had already received such a reward. The trembling knight whispered that she was the Lord's servant, and for her there were no problems because she was a warrior. Suddenly Ken called her to him, stretched out his hand, and said that since the girl knew his secret, she was now part of the family. Maya and Fio approached the young man together and, smiling happily, hugged him. The heroes moved deeper into the ruins of the city. The princess noticed that no matter how far they went, all the streets were covered with gold. The young man said that alchemists of those times became rich when they learned to move gold. He added that there was so much precious metal that it was used to build and decorate buildings to flaunt their superiority. Modus also had many battle alchemists, so other countries feared it. Even such a powerful city, which was supposed to prosper for millennia, simply disappeared. The boy did not understand why it happened, but he was going to find out everything. Along with this era, experienced alchemists disappeared as well. If the catastrophe repeated, everything could end much worse. Ken realized that all his friends and loved ones could die. The hero's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a fairy, who said she had gathered as much information as possible from the 3 nearest towers of the wise men. Zosimo's asked if the master was ready to listen to her, and seeing that Ken was nervous, the girls approached him to encourage him. They smiled warmly and nodded to him. After that, the young man asked the artificial fairy to show him everything. Zosimo's obeyed, and a screen appeared before him. He saw terrible scenes of a bloody massacre. Monsters of hatred attacked the city of Modus, tearing the flesh of the inhabitants and killing everyone they saw. People tried to defend themselves, but nothing helped. The heroes did not expect to see exactly these monsters. Zosimo said she had something else to show the master. She opened a new screen, and what the boys saw shocked them. Systems like Zosimo's attacked people. Ken was stunned by what the artificial fairies were doing. Zosimo suspected that there was a problem in the central control system of the fairies, the mother core. Theo asked if the system was okay, and the fairy replied that it worked on its own independently of the general system because the mother core did not affect it. The master created it that way. Ken explained that Zosimo's had its own mind, and he would never dare to connect her to the general system. His fairy was special among others. The boy asked if she could find out the cause of the breakdown. Zosim explained that the mother core is practically a perfect centralized control system. The fairies were like our security. Without them, there was no peace. Zosim claimed that the disaster Ken saw was caused by humans. She advised the gentleman to look at what was happening to the wounded. Just as the young man was about to reproach Zosim for showing death in front of Fio, he saw a horror. People's bodies began to melt from the inside, and something burst out of them. It was a beast breaking free from hatred. The assistant quietly explained that this is the true essence of these monsters. They emerge from the bodies of people affected by artificial fairies. At that moment, the youth realized that the country was destroyed by the most reliable system, and it turns out someone turned it against the people. Zosimo's told that 500 years ago, due to the cultivation of artificial intelligence, a bloody massacre occurred. The potion affected people's bodies and gave birth to monsters. From such an unexpected truth, Ken needed time to think everything over. Zosimo's was in solidarity with the master. She was also shocked by this news. The young man did not understand how he was different from those who died. Firstly, his fairy acted independently and was not connected to the mother core. Secondly, he was helped by the cradle of rebirth. Thirdly, he had subordinates whom he could fully trust and rely on. The boy was turning over in his mind what could have happened in the laboratory on the day of the disaster. He was lucky that the artifact was hidden deep underground. That is why he ended up in the future, and the hero believed that if he woke up, he could stop this horror. But he had no time. Ken was reborn 500 years after those terrible events. The young man trembled at the thought that he had failed to prevent that terrible chain of events. Seeing that the boy was overwhelmed with emotions, the girls became worried. They sat next to their friend and tried to convince him that he was not to blame for anything. Suddenly, a screen appeared before the young man. The artificial fairy reported that she had found something else that might be important for the master. A moment and his team had already appeared before him. They greeted their boss. Ken froze. He did not expect to see his old friends. They said that Modus was over, so they wanted to record a farewell message for the boss. The guys were going to leave the laboratory and try to stop this disaster. At that moment, the monster of hatred broke through to them. The girl gathered courage and said that since this was their last day, she would take the chance and confess to Ken. The comrades froze in shock. The boy confidently smiled at the camera and sincerely thanked the hero for taking him into the team, promising not to let the monsters destroy everything. Another comrade apologized for changing the settings of the resurrection cradle and assured that the boss's disease would be completely cured and it would never return. He did not know after how many hundreds of years he would wake up, and wished the chief a peaceful rest. The comrades promised to protect his body with their lives. The girl whispered once again that she loved Ken. When they parted, everyone sincerely hoped that Ken would finally start living for himself, and the recording cut off. Phil's eyes filled with tears. She said that her beloved's friends were good people. The young man agreed with her. They were the comrades he had been missing. The master ordered Zosima to break the black boxes of each alchemical laboratory and gather all information about the mother core and the monsters, and he was especially keen to know how the monster of hatred appeared near Sullivan. The artificial fairy obeyed. The hero decisively decided to figure everything out. Many sages and brilliant alchemists lived in the ruins of the city, but they could change nothing. Only Ken remained, and only he could do something. He knew he had to seize this chance to start a new life and create a better future, and he would not allow the disaster to happen again. Several days had passed since Modus visited them. The guys had already gathered in the tavern, and the young man was meanwhile saying goodbye to the girls. Fiat was worried about him and asked if he could manage on his own. Ken reassured her that it was just a small reconnaissance. Maya was not going to leave the gentleman alone. He said that only he, thanks to the artifacts, had the combat power of an entire army, and the girl did not know what to answer. She stepped back and said that she would gather knights and patrol the outskirts. Having gathered information from Zosimos, the young man was able to identify the most suspicious place to trust. It was a forest graveyard. Deep within it lay ruins where dangerous monsters had settled, and archives recorded that many mages had died there. They were once called alchemists, the gems of time, so it was quite likely that they remained from the remnants, and Ken was more than sure that this was somehow connected to the beasts of hatred. Because of this, the hero decided to go there to uncover the truth about such monsters, and in case they appeared again in the district, the young man asked Maya to gather knights for patrol. The princess and the alchemist climbed the hill and looked down at the gathered knights. Ken did not expect that Maya herself would lead them. The girl replied, "If it is for the people, then it is for the country." She said that if the gentleman realized it was dangerous there, he should return. The boy asked her not to worry about him and added that he could protect himself. The young man was worried that nothing would happen near the city. The princess said she was ready to give her life if necessary, and the hero sharply turned to her and said that she must survive because she was dear to him. The girl blossomed from being scolded and simultaneously told that Ken cared about her, and the young man repeated once more that he did not want the princess to suffer, and that if there was danger, she would take Fio and flee. Remembering former comrades who gave their lives for the safety of the chief, he bitterly asked Maya not to take on too much, and the girl did not understand the reasons for such words. The boy asked if he could complain. The princess did not object. He admitted that he did not want to be lonely and did not want any of them to suffer, and the girl replied that she understood him. The boy confessed that he was scared. Ken did not want it to happen again. He had already lost a lot and did not want to lose more. Maya said that if this gentleman lived happily and created a wonderful future, his comrades would be happy. Ken was surprised by this thought, then muttered that maybe she was right. The princess came closer and added that he was capable of great deeds but had forgotten about himself. She leaned in and kissed him on the forehead. The girl insisted to the young man that he must return to them because even the princess herself kissed him, and at the end asked him not to tell Fio about it. Ken entered the graveyard forest with the artificial fairy and asked if Zosimos noticed any signs of life, but she found nothing. An hour had already passed since they stepped into the forest, and the hero felt the atmosphere had noticeably grown heavier. Zosimos said they might encounter broken artificial fairies, so it was better to be cautious. Suddenly the boy heard the sound of a bell growing closer. The fairy said this sound was caused by movement. She explained that the magic in the air trembles and produces a sound similar to a bell. The young man suddenly realized that undead might be standing before them since Zosimo's detected no signs of life. The fairy suggested it could be a guardian of the ruins, and at that moment something cut through the tree trunks right in front of the hero. Magical blades rained down on the hero and he dodged as best he could. When there were too many, he threw a grenade, and after the explosion a witch appeared before him much larger than the young man. Was she the source of the bell? Ken asked if she could speak. The man introduced himself as a traveler and alchemist, and the witch began mumbling about the Lord of Death, destruction, and the end. The monster menacingly declared it would bring destruction and death to all. She asked someone where they were. Ken understood nothing. The artificial fairy suggested this was an automatic reaction to the word alchemist and said she had conducted a full analysis. Zosim said that an artificial fairy was definitely standing before them. The witch's body quickly began to decompose, and from it crawled out a monster resembling a huge insect. The monster screamed, asked its master where he had been, and said a new era was already at the threshold. Zosimos asked the master if he also saw an artificial fairy before him, but in the shell of a beast of hatred, and the master agreed. However, the boy was glad. He was confident he had enough strength to defeat the enemy, and the alchemist mentally addressed his fallen comrades to watch he would show them his true power.